Welcome to the fantasy audiobook, Wizards of the Marvel Universe. Chapter 41. I think it's not a big deal to borrow some of your blood, Yan Chen said calmly. It was just that pair of strange golden vertical pupils shining with a hint of luster. Dr. Lizard just looked at it and felt that his whole mind began to immerse in it, and his mind couldn't help but lose control. Boom! Suddenly, the whole head couldn't help but roar. A strong momentum suddenly descended on his head like the backflow of seawater. Dr. Lizard felt that his body was as heavy as 1,000 pounds and he couldn't move at all. The pores of the skin on the whole body tightened, and his heart couldn't help but stop beating for half a beat. It was as if he had encountered a natural enemy in the food chain, causing his body to tremble constantly. What kind of monster are you? After holding it in for a long time, Dr. Lizard finally stammered out these words. Feeling his body getting stiffer and stiffer, he suddenly became ruthless and bit his tongue hard. A bloody taste instantly filled his mouth. His body also seemed to gradually regain its vitality. Snort. Stop playing tricks. You are just a guy with more strength. Thinking of this, the fear in his heart gradually dissipated, and his whole body flew away from the wall. The reflection of Yan Chen was reflected in Dr. Lizard's pupils. In his opinion, this guy was just a monster with strong strength and maybe some Chinese kung fu. With his self-healing ability that was enough to regenerate broken limbs, he didn't believe that he couldn't be killed. Bang! The huge body accelerated again by using the force of the ground, and after the toes landed, there was a sudden concave pit. With the speed increasing again, the whole behemoth has come in front of Yan Chen. Let me go. The ruthless voice hadn't finished speaking. Boom! Two fists suddenly exploded in the air. The figure rushing over suddenly stopped, then flew backwards at a faster speed, and hit the ground behind with a bang. In the smoke that filled the ground, the crackling sound of roasting flesh and blood continued to be heard. Dr. Lizard fell to the ground, groaning in pain. 2 blood holes appeared on his waist and abdomen, but no blood was seen flowing out. The problem was more serious. It was because the high temperature of the flames had directly charred most of his flesh and blood. Ah, impossible, Dr. Lizard exclaimed in surprise. His own healing ability should have gradually healed the wound, but the fine flames at the wound had not been completely removed, and were still burning, exerting residual heat. What kind of flame is this? It's so overbearing. Before he woke up from the shock, the thick fog around him suddenly came, and a figure appeared directly in front of him. In front of him was a face with a smile outlined. Still lively and restless, a little. Bang. The huge body lying on the ground suddenly became lighter, and then after a dizzy spin, the whole body fell even more heavily to the ground. Puff. A stream of blood spurted out of Dr. Lizard's mouth. With this throw, the pit on the ground collapsed more than half a foot, and the fine lines like spider webs spread to a radius of several meters. Yan Chen released the lizard's tail in his hand, and then took out a blood collection needle from his cloak. Looking at the huge blood-sucking needle, Dr. Lizard's pupils contracted, as if he recalled the injections when he was a child, and his limbs began to tremble slightly. Bang! Another punch landed on the abdomen. The struggling body suddenly stopped, lying motionless in the pit. If it weren't for the slightest heartbeat, people would probably think it was completely dead. Aren't you asking for trouble? Yan Chen slowly retracted his right fist. If it weren't for the petrification ability affecting the blood collection, he wouldn't have been so brutal and violent to make it surrender. Then, Yan Chen inserted the blood-sucking needle into the artery. In a blink of an eye, the entire huge syringe was instantly filled with a stream of sticky scarlet blood. Salamander blood. The vital raw material for human enhancement potions was finally easily obtained. Of course, salamander blood was selected as one of the formulas because of its self-healing effect, so the huge lizard in front of him that could regenerate broken limbs could be a perfect replacement. To be honest, using the blood of this lizard doctor can also increase the effect of the enhancement potion a lot. At this time, a silent movement, although it was inaudible, but relying on his own phoenix soul, the surrounding slightest movement could not be hidden from him. Soon, a lot of noisy footsteps came from an underground passage. Hurry up, that lizard monster is just ahead. Boss Osborne has said that he wants them alive. Everyone, be careful of the guns. Although the sound of the conversation was very faint, it could not be hidden from Yan Chen's ears. As for the Osborne group, he would not pay much attention to it. Not long after, fully armed mercenaries rushed into the passage. They saw a young man in a cloak, who was stepping on a lizard to collect blood, and his behavior was very strange. "Raise your hands. Be careful of our guns going off." The mercenary leader showed a cruel smile. As soon as he finished speaking, a bunch of people raised their guns and pointed them at Yan Chen. "But I'm sorry, our boss doesn't want this matter to be known to the outside world, so you'd better go to hell." "Really?" Yan Chen said nonchalantly, "then check and see if your weapons are still usable." What did you do?" The muzzles of everyone's guns actually curled and bent under the flames, and then at a speed visible to the naked eye, the more than 1-foot-long guns gradually melted quickly like ice in summer. Feeling the terrible heat in their hands, everyone couldn't help but throw away their weapons. They were mercenaries who lived on the edge of a knife, doing all kinds of evil things, and were accustomed to life and death, but this was the first time they had seen such a strange change, so they looked at the young man in front of them with terrified eyes. Soon, the entire syringe was filled. With a crisp sound, Yan Chen carefully put the tube of blood into the space equipment, stood up straight and looked around at the mercenaries around him. "Me too, I'm sorry, I don't want the outside world to know, so you go to hell too." At this time, he was repeating what the mercenary boss had just said. Now it sounded very ironic to them. No. Then, an inexplicable flame ignited them directly, and then their whole bodies melted like candles. Yan Chen no longer paid attention to these clowns and was about to leave. Suddenly, another noise came from afar. Really one after another. It seems that the giant lizard lying on the ground has really caused a lot of trouble, so that many people have come to the door. But now the person who suddenly came to the underground tunnel. It was someone Yan Chen had met once. Red Spider-Man. Hey, I'm Spider-Man, not Spider-Man. Don't give me random nicknames. And don't you watch TV or read newspapers? Don't you know I'm very popular in New York? A series of words came out of his mouth like a machine gun. He lived up to his reputation as a chatterbox. But Peter Parker was not as relaxed as his words. Looking at the crowd that was self-igniting like torches in the underground tube, his expression was inexplicably panicked, but it was not revealed under the uniform hood. Listening to their gradually low and whimpering hisses, Peter Parker's heart was ignited by justice again. He came here to find the lizard monster that disrupted the graduation ceremony, but he didn't expect to encounter such a weird thing, and the person in front of him was very familiar. Isn't this the Chinese youth who got into a fight at the graduation party? Hey, by the way, you did these guys, didn't you? And what did you do with the lizard monster? Peter Parker said directly. But doubts arose in his mind. He felt that he had not only seen this person at the dinner, but also somewhere else. Yan Chen felt a little impatient when he listened to his questions. And according to the time, Al Kelly was almost back, so he could prepare the enhancement potion by rushing back. "All right, my righteous friend, it's time for you to go home." The dormant blood in Yan Chen's body surged and revived. The clear black and white eyes once again transformed into strange golden vertical pupils, and an invisible dragon's pressure directly tilted towards Spider-Man. Wow! Peter felt the spider sense in his mind instantly send out a strong danger signal, and he couldn't help but move his body. But his body had already dodged and moved. But he couldn't escape the range of pressure. In an instant, Peter felt like a huge mountain was pressing down on him, his breath couldn't help but choke. His whole body couldn't help but stiffen, and a sense of fear of being spied on by natural enemies arose in his mind. Bang! The magic wand in his sleeve spewed out a white light. Oblige! Without any preparation, the spell was directly generated in Parker's mind. The lively eyes under the mask suddenly fell into a state of absent-mindedness, and were covered by the magic wave of the Muggle-repelling spell. Peter's expression could not help but regain vitality again. He clapped his hands and remembered that Aunt May at home called him for something. The figure who was meddling in other people's business just now turned a blind eye to everything in front of him and hurried home very quickly. Oblige, Muggle Shield. These two spells are basically the most commonly used tricks of the Ministry of Magic, and are also the usual solutions to deal with Muggles who have witnessed magic. There is still a trace of burning smell in the air, and the arrogant figure just now has disappeared, and only the carbon prints left on the ground show the traces of his existence. Okay, it's time to go home. Yan Chen sighed. Before leaving, he looked at Dr. Lizard on the ground, but he had no intention of being ruthless. Of course, he was not reluctant to leave. This was a rare mobile blood bank. If he hadn't thought of those noisy magical animals at home, he might have thought of catching it and raising it. However, the lizard blood just collected was enough to extract about 7 bottles of enhancement potion. After all, there was no use in getting so many potions. First, he was not a saint, and second, he was not a businessman. Okay, it's time to go. Crackle, crackle. The sound like burning wood burst out again, and Yan Chen's figure disappeared from the spot for a moment. When he appeared again, Yan Chen had already returned to the duplex apartment. Coo coo coo. As soon as she came back, she heard the sound of Owl Kelly. Her furry body kept burying its head in the feed in front of her. When she saw her owner coming back, she also proudly fluttered her feathers and continued to eat the food on the table. Susan, who was wearing thin pajamas, saw Yan Chen coming back, but she stood up from the sofa, showed a sweet smile and said, "Is everything going well?" "Well, there is no problem." Yan Chen did not hide his intention and said directly. "That's good. By the way, Kelly brought back a lot of supplies." Susan pointed to the small bag hanging on the table and said, "Although the bag is small, it is a space device that has cast the traceless extension spell. It is enough to hold a lot of supplies." However, what was unexpected was that Kelly also learned that Tony Stark had prepared more potion ingredients, which could not be filled by a small space device. This was beyond Yan Chen's expectations. It seems that Stark Enterprises' worldly strength can indeed do a lot for him and reduce a lot of unnecessary time waste for him. Yan Chen thought about it and decided to go to his house again tomorrow. And now, the most important thing is to develop the human body enhancement potion. After all the materials and raw materials are ready. Gurgle gurgle. In the magic workshop, the sound of potion brewing continued to be heard from the crucible. 1 ounce of herbs was added to 1 pint of water and mixed. After the water began to boil, the lid was covered and boiled for 30 minutes, and then it was allowed to cool completely naturally. Of course, this was only the first step in the boiling process of the potion. Then boiling water was poured into the nettle grass, with a ratio of 1 pint of water to 1 ounce of herbs. Vampire heart blood and salamander blood were continuously added in sequence. The violent medicinal properties instantly made dense explosions in the crucible, as if the pot was about to explode. At this time, Yan Chen directly added the Angelica in his hand. The main and auxiliary Angelica can dilute the medicinal properties and remove the effect of madness. Soon, the crucible that was about to explode just now calmed down and stabilized. After adding a few more magical herbs, all the ingredients that should be put into the pot have been completely released. Clang. After covering the crucible lid, Yan Chen exhaled slightly, and it will be completely ready in a few hours. As time flies, soon it was time to take the pot off the stove. Yan Chen breathed a sigh of relief and slowly opened the lid of the crucible. Looking at the small pool of red liquid flowing like amber inside, he couldn't help but smile with satisfaction. The enhancement potion was born. Enhancement potion. It was finally born perfectly. Then, Susan's physique can be improved by leaps and bounds. Thinking of her sleeping like a crabapple in spring, Yan Chen felt strange in his heart. After injecting the enhancement potion, he would not need to use magic spells to restore his vitality repeatedly. Of course, using the enhancement potion in this way would definitely make Yan Chen's former potion teacher mad. It needs to be filtered and then sealed for 2 or 3 days. Yan Chen touched his chin and thought directly. After carefully treating the liquid medicine with flames to remove some impurities, it was sealed in a bottle to allow the medicinal properties to fully immerse and spread. This trip to refine the liquid medicine took Yan Chen a whole day in the magic workshop. When he came out, the whole sky had already reached evening, and Susan even left a note on the table, which was that she had returned this morning. "I went to school. It is said that I am preparing for the mission of the space station." Yan Chen sighed. Without Yiren, looking at the empty room, I felt a sense of emptiness and boredom. I have gotten used to her presence. It will take some time for her to come back. Yan Chen was planning to find something to do. Got it. Tony Stark still has a batch of raw materials stored there, so it's a good opportunity for him to go there. Before leaving, Yan Chen came to the monster breeding house on the floor and began to take care of and feed it several times a day. Feeling the arrival of food, the giant cocoon hanging on the railing suddenly opened, and a pair of blue-green bat wings slowly opened, like a huge and beautiful butterfly. This is the curled winged demon. Speaking of which, it is also one of the more dangerous existences in this monster house. It moves quickly and has terrible attack and defense power. The ability to feed on human brains alone makes it a very terrifying bird. The terrifying venom secreted from its mouth is enough to harm an adult beast in an instant. Of course, this venom can eliminate bad memories after a certain amount of dilution, which is also one of the ingredients of the demulcent in Yan Chen's hand. Ah, open your mouth. The winged demon hummed a few times, then opened its small mouth. The sharp teeth in its mouth instantly bit into the glass bottle, and a few drops of venom gushed out from the hollow teeth. Okay, be obedient. After feeding a few pieces of flesh and blood, Yan Chen walked out of the monster house. Cultivating magical animals is a matter of patience after all. But it is also a matter of killing time. After walking out, it has taken about half an hour. The evening glow that was dyed red outside the window just now is no longer there, and what comes is a thick night-like gauze. Zhao Hong, the magic floating cloak in the hall, hangs behind Yan Chen with a wheeze. With the silent chanting of the spell in his heart, a gust of invisible wind slowly rolled up on the ground, and an invisible wave in the air slowly spread out. Yan Chen also dissipated at the original place. Crackle, crackle, a sound like burning wood suddenly rang out in a luxurious villa. Then Yan Chen's figure appeared directly on the ground. Tony, I came to play with you. Yan Chen shrugged. He was stunned by the empty living room. Is he not at home? He just greeted him. Why is there no one here now? But it doesn't matter. Anyway, the raw materials are here. When Yan Chen was about to find his own herbs, he suddenly saw a broken wine bottle on the table in the living room, and the red wine was all over the floor. At the same time, a sound as thin as a mosquito came from outside the living room. So that's it. Did something unexpected happen? No need to think too much. Whoosh! Driven by the magic floating cloak, the whole person's body was as fast as a sharp arrow. After leaving a trail of afterimages, Tony was seen lying on the ground motionless. His face was pale, and the blue veins under his skin were all over his body, as if he was about to die. Yan Chen knew at a glance that his life was in danger and he might die at any time. No need to think too much. After all, there was a fate of blackmail, and it was very pleasant to cooperate with him, so he would not let him die directly. Besides, this was just an easy job of a spell. Get well soon. After a short and light voice, Tony felt his whole body bathed in the warm sunshine. His sick body suddenly became like a dead tree in spring, and instantly regained vitality. His eyes, which had been absent just now, also regained consciousness. This is the second life, Yan Chen said with a smile. Seeing his brilliant and infectious smile, Tony felt a whine in his heart. In his eyes, this was simply a fox's cunning smile. After all, the last life-saving money cost him a lot of money. However, this time the life-saving money didn't seem to be unfair. Fortunately, he didn't hear his next blackmail words, but made Tony feel relieved. But, isn't this still the point? Obadiah Stan actually killed himself just now and took away the arc reactor in his heart, so that Tony almost lost it. Ha, Tony sighed, then inserted the old reactor that had become a collection into his chest, ready to drive the Iron Man suit himself to stop Obadiah Stane's next plan. But when Tony looked at the slender figure in front of him, he suddenly thought, why don't he ask Yan Chen to help? Maybe I have something to ask of you. Yan Chen raised his eyebrows. Of course, he knew that there must be some conspiracy behind this, but he looked at him leisurely and said, this is not a good deal. After listening to this, Tony naturally knew the meaning. For him, it must be no problem to deal with Obadiah. On the contrary, it would cost a lot of money to ask him to take action. Thinking of Obadiah's behind-the-scenes transactions with Middle Eastern terrorist organizations, and his blood feud with him, and this time the truth will be revealed, he will definitely be able to recover the stocks in his hands. Tony thought of this, gritted his teeth and said, almost 10% of Stark's stock. Plus the future channel fees, I don't want them all. After hearing this, Yan Chen smiled and said, deal. Industrial Park. This is the vast Stark Industrial Park. The entire land area alone is comparable to dozens of football fields, and there are dozens of parks inside. District 16. District 16. Pepper Potts led a group of people and hurried over. Of course, this was also because she found out today that Obadiah Stane had a behind-the-scenes deal with a Middle Eastern terrorist organization, and what was even more terrifying was that he facilitated Tony's kidnapping. Such a shocking inside story made her nervous all of a sudden, and she led a group of agents to detain him. Soon, they finally arrived at the park. Pepper Potts picked up the door card directly and wanted to open the door, but no matter how she tried, the magnetic sensing device still didn't work. What happened? Is it locked inside? Thinking of Obadiah hiding in there, Potts couldn't help but be sure of this answer. Just as Agent Coulson was about to help, a calm and gentle voice bloomed in everyone's ears, "If you don't mind, let me do it." Everyone was stunned, and then turned around to see a young man in a red robe with a smile on his face. Coulson's face turned pale, and the SHIELD agents behind him also looked at each other, their muscles tensed. When did this person approach them? As well-trained agents, they are aware of the surrounding situation. But now, an unidentified teenager came to them so easily. Thinking of this, Coulson's right hand couldn't help but reach for the pistol at his waist. After all, Pepper Potts was not as sensitive as the agents. When she heard someone speak up for help, and the boy in front of her, who was like a big boy next door, had a kind of approachable temperament. Potts didn't think much about it, but stepped aside and nodded. Yan Chen just smiled when he heard it, and his slender body slowly approached the door, took the ID card from Potts' hand, and then gently placed it on the sensing and identification device. There was no beep sound of successful sensing, but the entire heavy and solid door opened automatically. Maybe you are just too impatient. Look, isn't this a very simple matter? Yan Chen handed the ID card in his hand back to Potts. Potts listened to his words, but he didn't doubt anything. He just thought that he had done something wrong in his haste. She touched her forehead and said, "Maybe it is true." Thinking of what happened to Obadiah, she couldn't wait to move forward, but the SHIELD agents headed by Zizan were still looking at the boy in front of them with great confusion. Since his arrival, his whole behavior revealed something weird. Silently, came around his well-trained agent. Then, he took Potts' card. The swiping method was exactly the same, but he successfully opened the door at once. How is this possible? Could it be that this door also looks at the face and the character? It's too weird. It's as if there is a magic force pushing it in the dark. Coulson couldn't help but think so. Looking at the weird boy in front of him who was still walking forward, he walked up to him and said, "Excuse me. There is a very serious social case involved here. So, I'm afraid you need to step aside." After saying that, he took out a certificate from his black suit and stood in front of Yan Chen. Yan Chen didn't see anything from the bald eagle logo, but the name, National Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Protection. That's too difficult to understand. "Sir, don't embarrass us." Seeing that he was still indifferent, the agents around him couldn't help but step forward a few steps. Their arms couldn't help but stretch down, and the bulge under the waist clothes could be seen as a hidden gun. Yan Chen raised his eyebrows, looked at their serious faces like poker cards, and couldn't help but outline a smile, and said, "Okay. You can go home." Go home. Listening to his words, everyone's eyes couldn't help but fall into a daze. Potts, who walked to the front, noticed the figure behind him suddenly stopped moving, and couldn't help but urge back, "Why are you still slow? Can you hurry up?" However, the crowd behind did not respond immediately. Suddenly, the group of agents in black suits all realized and their expressions tightened, as if they recalled something important. "Oh, right, I forgot to turn off the gas before I went out. To avoid any accidents, I need to go back now." "Me too. My mother is sick and in the hospital, so I need to go home." "What a coincidence, my wife is giving birth at home, I have to go to the hospital too." Even the usually steady Coulson said, "Oh, right. Director Nick Fury wants me to go to the office." As soon as he finished speaking, the group of SHIELD agents quickly retreated. What? Potts had never expected such a scene to happen. Looking at their figures leaving one after another, he suddenly felt incredible. Wasn't this a joke to him? "Hey, are you crazy? Are you kidding me? Come back here." But no matter how she urged them, they didn't leave one by one. What's the matter? They just said goodbye to me and left with such a perfunctory reason. What's the joke? Are they playing a joke on me? Yan Chen stood up and said, you also know how unreliable the state organs are, but it's okay, I'm here. By the way, I forgot to introduce myself. Tony called me here, and I already know the details. Don't worry. After saying that, he patted his chest and walked straight forward. Pepper Potts looked at the boy in front of him, but he looked more and more reliable. Hearing that Tony introduced him, he couldn't help but calm down a lot. But at the same time, there was still a rage in his heart that couldn't be suppressed. The group of people just now were extremely rude. They told me that they were agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and could handle a lot of security matters and troubles for me. But when things were already burning to their eyebrows, they just withdrew and left. There is such an unreliable security department. Potts is naturally like the nicknamed Pepper, and it is easy to get angry in his heart, and he said angrily. As the instigator, Yan Chen just smiled slightly. What happened just now was naturally his handiwork. Repelling charm. This universal repelling spell can make all muggles automatically remember the emergency and leave in a hurry. This is also the reason why the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents left in a hurry just now. As the instigator, Yan Chen just smiled slightly, then followed Potts's steps and walked into the District 16 campus. However, Potts still couldn't forget the humiliating joke just now, and still said angrily, after I go back, I will definitely come to complain. S.H.I.E.L.D. Right. If I don't take revenge for today's hatred, I'm not a little hot pepper. Listening to her words, Yan Chen tried hard to hold back the smile in his heart, and without any more explanation, he followed her deeper and deeper. But at this time, the incandescent lights around suddenly flickered frequently, as if the power supply was insufficient. Boom! A dull vibration also erupted, as if there was a giant in the distance stepping on the ground. And with such a loud noise, the lights in the entire park went out instantly. The architectural structure of the room is made of steel, and the cold gray tones add a touch of gloom to the laboratory. Ah! Potts burst into a scream, then hugged Yan Chen's arm with his whole body, and said weakly, what's going on? As soon as the voice fell, accompanied by the sound of the exhaust valve, the whole air couldn't help but heat up several degrees, and the whimpering sound like a whale made Potts inexplicably startled. At this time, a circle of light not far away suddenly lit up. Against the backdrop of this light, the whole hideous and terrifying steel behemoth appeared from the black curtain. With every step it took, the whole earth shook continuously. Surprised, Pepper Potts, I heard everything you said just now. The extremely cold words were undoubtedly from Obadiah's voice. After hearing this, Potts looked at the steel behemoth in front of him with a face full of shock. The smooth body of the machine was shining with ripple-like blue light, and the huge body that was nearly 4 meters tall was prominent. This voice actually came from inside this steel behemoth. Potts' face was filled with fear. After all, she was just a woman. Moreover, anyone who faced such a terrifying beast would be unable to conceal their uneasiness. Look at you, you made me laugh to death just now. Who are you looking for? After Obadiah finished speaking, he laughed. The sound seemed to be amplified by the loudspeaker of the Iron Man suit, making the whole space tremble. Potts' face turned pale. Of course, if you hadn't been rummaging through my computer files, I wouldn't have ended up like this. So there's a pretty boy here. Hey, aren't you the guy from the last party? Obadiah lowered his huge iron head and stared at Yan Chen below. Yan Chen just smiled and said, it's you. I thought Tony was going to kill someone. It turns out it's you. Potts couldn't help but get anxious after hearing this, and said to the person next to him, you go first. His target is me. It won't threaten your life. Snort. Want to run? Have you asked me? As soon as the rough voice fell, violent vibrations continued to be heard, and the entire ground seemed to be shaking. With the gushing of the power valve, the originally heavy and huge steel beast was very agile and swift. After a few steps, the entire body like a mountain was already in front of him. Die for me. The iron fist forged from steel blasted out fiercely. The fist didn't arrive yet. The fist wind arrived first. The terrible storm came with the iron fist. Potts' beautiful golden hair was messy and scattered, and his pupils shrank violently. His body was motionless, but he was too scared to move. Bang! A terrifying touch sound suddenly came out, and an invisible shock wave was blown away. Pot's body collapsed to the ground under the swaying of the wind, but the huge iron fist that was originally smashed in front of him stayed more than 1 meter away. A slender and powerful figure in front of him stopped the fist from attacking further. "It's you," Potts said in shock. He thought that this Chinese guy might be called by Tony for some time, but he didn't expect that he was so powerful. Yan Chen smiled and turned around and said, "Okay. You can go now." These plain words seemed to suppress infinite anger, which startled Potts, and the pair of weird golden vertical pupils made her inexplicably scared. She didn't dare to do anything, and she knew that she shouldn't stay here and drag others down, so she quickly got up and ran out. "Impossible." A furious voice suddenly came out from the steel behemoth again. Obadiah's mind was no longer on Potts. He looked at the young man in front of him and let out a slight roar. Boom! A dull roar burst out again, and another iron fist, like an invincible steel, flew over again, trying to completely destroy the ant in front of him who was trying to stop a chariot with his arms. However, there was another crisp bang. The entire aggressive steel arm was curved again. Yan Chen's two seemingly slender arms actually blocked the two steel giant hands of the giant beast in front of him. "Impossible, what kind of monster are you?" Obadiah's roar came from the cockpit again. As the power valve blew up, the heavy iron fist became even heavier under the flames of the booster. Crack, crack, Yan Chen's body kept retreating, and the smooth marble floor began to scrape out sparks. Then, with the huge force coming from the pressure, it kept breaking and crumbling, leaving a long white groove. On the contrary, interesting. Yan Chen's normal human vocal cords were very strange, and they were accompanied by a trembling beast roar. The pair of golden vertical pupils were filled with murderous intent, staring fiercely at the front. A pair of muscular arms stood upright in front of him like a bull. As the huge power of the steel arm in front of him continued to increase, the entire slender and white arm became thicker. What's more terrifying is that it was also covered with layers of fine black scales. "Die for me." Bang! The flame of the booster increased fiercely, the entire energy output reached its peak, and the arm strength of the giant steel hand also reached its peak. However, Yan Chen's body in front of him did not shrink by half under this terrifying force. Instead, he stood up straight with this huge force. At this time, the pair of arms covered with black scales, as the dragon blood lurking in the body continued to revive, actually turned the entire palm into a pair of ferocious claws. Suddenly, there was a click. A sound of mechanical parts breaking suddenly came from the arm. "Impossible," Obadiah exclaimed, and the power valve spewed out bursts of white smoke. What shocked him even more was that a violent beast roar came from in front of him. Roar! The violent roar of the beast erupted from the front. Obadiah, who was in the cockpit of the steel giant, suddenly felt as if his eardrums were about to be shattered, and his mind could not help but roar. Suddenly, a burst of white smoke gushed out from Yan Chen's body, suddenly filling the entire front. "What's going on?" Obadiah asked in confusion. Beep. In a hurry, he couldn't help but press the button in his hand, and the view in the cockpit suddenly switched to infrared thermal sensing mode. But the screen in front of him was full of red light. "This is impossible. The heat emitted by the human body doesn't cover such a large area. Could it be that there is something wrong with the instrument?" Obadiah began to check the instrument in his hand in a hurry. Crack! But at this moment, there was a sudden violent cracking sound from the outside of the huge fuselage. Pieces of steel plates began to make continuous noises from the head to the waist and abdomen of the fuselage, and the power valve of the entire fuselage made a whimpering sound as if a huge beast was crushing the entire mecha. Looking at the bulging parts of the machine on the monitor, Obadiah was stunned for some reason, and then he couldn't help but think of that possibility. A giant beast. Roar. Just as I thought of this, a violent beast roar suddenly came from above my head. Ah! The roar at close range made Obadiah hum in pain, and his fragile eardrum burst directly, with blood flowing out of his ear canal. What was even more terrifying was that with this roar, the white mist that filled the surroundings instantly dissipated. Obadiah looked at the scene in front of him, his pupils filled with shock. Without the need for infrared thermal imaging, without the cover of smoke, a ferocious beast appeared directly in front of him. Roar! Another beast roar! The giant dragon transformed by Yan Chen slapped down with two ferocious claws. With a crackling sound, the entire surface of the steel-cast body collapsed and dented instantly, and the protruding shoulder armor was cut off. The sound of electricity suddenly erupted from the exposed cable device underneath. Impossible. Obadiah's face was as pale as paper. Looking at the huge golden vertical pupils like copper bells, his pupils couldn't help but shrink. Moreover, this slender body that was as smooth as an assembly line made his mind go blank. Bang! The two huge scaly wings slapped violently, and a terrifying storm gushed out from the joints and membranes. The humming sound of the wind catkins was so loud that even the steel mecha in front of him couldn't help but be pushed half a foot. Boom! A loud noise suddenly came out. The giant dragon that had soared several meters in the air flew directly into the air, and its huge body slammed down on the mecha. Bang! The ground suddenly cracked rapidly, sunken nearly 3 inches, forming a hole like a meteorite crater. Puff! Obadiah spat out a mouthful of old blood. The entire cockpit collapsed and compressed completely under this huge force. The body inside was instantly squeezed to one place by the outer armor. Under the terrifying pressure, even breathing felt very difficult. "Weren't you very crazy just now?" Yan Chen said with anger, and then slapped down with his palm. Bang! The entire steel right arm that was so powerful just now was shattered and broken directly under the slap of the ferocious giant claws, with the sound of electricity. "Why can't I move now?" Another loud noise. Bang! The entire left arm was crushed and broken by a palm strike just like before. Obadiah screamed in frustration, and was not even confused by the human voice of a giant beast. Perhaps his whole mind was so frightened that he couldn't wake up. "Ah, let me out," Obadiah cried out with sobs. The control instruments in the cockpit had been squeezed into a ball, and there was no response at all. In other words, the whole mecha could not move. And he was just a prisoner in a broken iron barrel. Thinking that he was so majestic in the cockpit just now, but now the whole driving place has become a prison, Obadiah's heart was filled with despair. Suddenly, the pressure on his body suddenly eased. A glimmer of hope rose in Obadiah's heart, and he shouted, "I want to negotiate. I can give you." While talking, buzz, a sound of flapping wings suddenly erupted. Then the giant dragon that rose to the sky, ignored the words of the people below, and directly removed the buoyancy of its body, and smashed it hard, like a mountain pressing down on its head. Boom! An even more terrifying loud noise was heard. The sound waves generated directly caused the tempered glass in the park to shatter, and the ground within a radius of nearly 100 meters instantly sank and collapsed. A thick white smoke rose from the landing point and rushed up. Whoosh! A violent breath spewed out from the dragon's head, and the white mist that permeated the body instantly dissipated a little. At the same time, the iron armor that was smashed below instantly became a discus more than 1 foot high. Obadiah in the cockpit naturally became a blood pie, and a trace of thick blood flowed out of the gap in the mecha. That's all. After these words, the dragon under the smoke disappeared. Only the bloody corpse of Obadiah was left. Bang! There was a roar in the sky. At this time, a golden and red steel armor passed by like a meteor, and the back booster banged again. The entire steel armor had already arrived in the air and came to the sky above the park. "Jarvis, can you help me scan what's going on?" Tony looked at the outside of the park below and felt that no battle had ever taken place. But when he entered District 16, he found that the entire battle was very intense. "Gentlemen, the Obadiah inside is dead." "Really?" Tony said with a tremor as he looked at the mecha that had completely collapsed in the pit on the ground. He didn't expect that he was just a step late, and the entire mecha driven by Obadiah was killed. But when he thought of Obadiah's 2 attempts to murder him, the complex emotions that had risen in Tony's heart disappeared in an instant. Of course, the great revenge has been taken. But the reward made him feel painful. Bang! A dragon shadow in the sky seemed to be floating in the sea of clouds. Buzz! The slender dragon body with smooth assembly line appeared faintly in the clouds. Every flap of the huge wings left a manic sonic boom in the air. The whole body also easily broke the speed of sound in an instant, and traveled 1,000 miles in an instant. With a whoosh, it went straight into the thick and dense clouds, but when it came out again, it was a human body breaking through the clouds. "It's time to go home." Yan Chen's voice just fell, and the whole person disappeared in the air. Hearing the noise, Nick Fury, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., raised his head from the documents on the desk. "Agent Coulson," He looked at the visitor in confusion, then looked at the watch in his hand. Why are you back? As his right-hand man, Director Nick still trusted this young and promising agent in front of him, but when did he become so irritable? Without waiting for his breathing to even out, Agent Coulson said directly, Chief, don't you have something to talk to me about? I have something to talk to you about. But not now, right? Did you finish the task I assigned to you so quickly? Nick Fury was confused. Why did you come back to me now? Mission, Coulson asked with a puzzled look on his face. Director Nick slapped his face, looked at him in surprise and said, Oh my God. Didn't you forget to go to Stark Enterprises to find out the situation? I thought the director wanted to talk to me about something. So, Coulson said very embarrassedly. He didn't know why he ran back. Director Nick did not doubt it and sighed. It seems that I have put too much pressure on you at work. It's time for you to give yourself a chance to take a break. In fact, he had already chosen Coulson as his successor, so he did not blame him too much. All right, Coulson looked helpless. As a victim of the Muggle-repelling curse, he couldn't sort out his thoughts. On the other side, Yan Chen, the instigator, picked up Susan from Columbia University. After shopping with her in the mall and watching a romantic movie, the two of them naturally got addicted when they returned home. They slept together on the sofa in the living room without taking off their shoes. After such a commotion, another night passed. The whole living room was scattered with a pile of their underwear. The sofa, dining table, kitchen and windowsill all had traces of their love. Even the bathroom was not spared. It can be said that they were crazy to the extreme. Of course, in the next 2 weeks, the two of them seemed to have returned to their past cohabitation. Yan Chen also started to live in a small room like before, while Susan was still busy with graduation homework. However, unlike before, Yan Chen personally picked her up on the way to and from school. Of course, the bigger difference was that the two of them actually had to sleep together under the development of the traceless extension spell. The second floor of the entire duplex villa was completely transformed by Yan Chen. The two people's rooms no longer exist, but are combined into a huge bedroom. Of course, the original magic workshop was also moved out by Yan Chen. Although there is no odor under magic, it still affects the visual perception and also damages the warm atmosphere of the family. Therefore, the entire magic workshop was moved to the 4th floor by Yan Chen. The 4th floor was originally a treasure house, storing Yan Chen's various treasures and raw materials related to magic. But with the help of the traceless extension spell, a space was completely opened up as a place to place the magic workshop. After all, there are related magic raw materials next to it, which is more convenient and reasonable. In addition, the 5th floor, which was originally used to house magical animals, was completely moved away by Yan Chen and moved to the newly opened underground floor. The original 5th floor will be transformed by Yan Chen into a brand new space, that is, the practice room, or the meditation room. So, the original meditation practice and the process of making magic potions would not be carried out in his and Susan's bedroom, which can be regarded as a complete separation of work and life. Therefore, the architectural layout of the villa apartment has become very different after some space transformation. The entire villa apartment has a total of 6 floors. The basement is a brand new floor, which is a breeding ground for magical animals. The 1st and 2nd floors are used for normal living. Except for the bedrooms, there are not many changes, and the layout is still the original. The 3rd floor of the apartment is the library data room, which is basically filled with magic books from Yan Chen's original world. If you look at it casually from the bookshelf, you can even see the Advanced Transfiguration Guide, close double angle bracket, open double angle bracket standard spells, level 4 close double angle bracket, open double angle bracket thousands of wonderful herbs and mushrooms close double angle bracket, open double angle bracket curses and counter curses, and other magic books. Of course, there is also Hogwarts, a history of the school, close double angle bracket, open double angle bracket from hatching eggs to Nirvana and other interesting books. These are the books that Yan Chen learned during his lifetime, and they can also be said to be his greatest treasure, which was unexpectedly preserved in the soul space. You know, as the most talented and brilliant person since Merlin, Yan Chen is well read and has read countless books. The library where these magic books are stored now can be regarded as the largest library after the Library of Hogwarts and other collection rooms. It can be said that it is enough to establish a magic school. Every time Yan Chen scanned these books, he couldn't help but have this thought. But when he thought about how young he was and how he had to face a group of naughty kids, he couldn't help but give up this idea. Of course, the people here are basically muggles. Yan Chen sighed. Perhaps it was because of the world. Even the magicians he saw in this world did not have the qualifications and bloodline to practice their magic. Of course, this was also because the magic systems of the two worlds were completely different. He took back the thoughts in his mind and returned to the floor arrangement of the villa. The fourth floor is the treasure house where treasures and potions are placed. In order to facilitate the acquisition of materials and reasonable specifications, the magic workshop for making potions was also placed on the same floor by Yan Chen. After moving away the magical animals, the fifth floor will be used as a new floor and turned into a practice room by him, which can also be called a meditation room. Meditation. For Yan Chen, this concept of magic is a practice method learned in this world. That is to communicate with the elements of heaven and earth in the outside world. This is also the practice method of the mages of Kamaji Mahal. Seeking breakthroughs and trying to advance to a higher level, Yan Chen will naturally not miss any practice methods. So, the fifth floor meditation room was born. Of course, in addition to this, the name of the meditation room is inexplicably in line with a basin in the room. Yan Chen looked at a bowl of basins on the high platform in the corner and couldn't help but outline a smile. It was an ancient magic item from the last world, the meditation basin. Since it was a magic item, it certainly contained extraordinary magic power. It was an incredible tool that could be used to preserve thoughts and memories in the mind. Save the memory. This shallow stone basin in front of him can record any memory in his mind. Yan Chen wiped this valuable basin slowly. The edge of the stone basin was engraved with runes and various unknown and strange ancient symbols, showing its extraordinary historical atmosphere. Of course, this basin that can store memories seems to have little effect on Yan Chen, a demonic magic genius. But in fact, even if he has the ability to remember everything he sees, it is difficult to notice all the details of the past scenes. And more importantly, he can use it to preserve the memories left by the previous soul. If it is more accurate, it should be called. That was the memory of his study in Kama Sutra. That is a very precious memory. Yan Chen wiped the meditation basin and looked at the water in the basin filled with silver smoke, and couldn't help but smile with satisfaction. These silver substances like curling smoke have the memory of thoughts. It's time to review the scene in the library of Kamaji Mahal. A black magic wand fell from Yan Chen's sleeve, and then he pointed the tip of the magic wand at his temple. Without any sound, Yan Chen just frowned slightly, but after a few seconds, the magic wand in his hand was slowly lifted up, and a bright silver ribbon slowly pulled out from his temple. The magic wand in his right hand was slightly pressed down, and the silver ribbon was completely placed in the meditation basin. Pop! The water surface in the meditation basin suddenly rippled, and the entire silver ribbon floated like ink after entering the water. Mission accomplished. The entire memory of the library at that time was immediately placed in the meditation basin. Such a big deal. Of course, it was because the meditation basin was not just about storing memories, the most important thing was that it could help one enter the memories of that time. That's right, entering the scene in the memory, this is the value of the meditation basin. There is no time to lose. Yan Chen's body slightly bent, his fingers gently touched the silver ribbon just now, and then the whole person's mind was immediately firmly attracted by an inexplicable suction. With such a strange movement, the phoenix soul in his mind was instinctively defended, firmly in the sea of consciousness without moving. What a terrifying soul strength! Yan Chen sighed inwardly. According to the past, he would have entered instantly. This also raised his understanding of the phoenix soul to a higher level. Yan Chen sighed slightly, then let go of his instinctive defense, and his entire soul was instantly immersed in the meditation basin. Wow! The sky and the earth were quickly twisted and stretched, a bit like the teleportation scene when the apparition appeared. But soon, the whole confused scene calmed down instantly. When he appeared again, Yan Chen had suddenly come from the meditation room on the 5th floor of the apartment to a very simple library that seemed to be opened in a stone cave. Of course, the change of scene does not mean the real arrival of the flesh and blood body, but only that the soul has come to a memory scene in the past. More importantly, and more accurately, although he arrived at the memory scene of the past, but he did not enter the past timeline. To put it simply, the scene of the past memory was recorded into a movie disc, and Yan Chen only entered the scene in this disc. Therefore, this means that he can't affect anyone in this memory fragment, won't change anything, and won't cause any time paradox. In addition, everyone in the scene inside can't see him anyway. Yan Chen smiled and walked through the library in a swagger. Everyone reading on the bookshelf and the table couldn't see this unexpected intruder at all. The owner of this body. At the corner, Yan Chen also saw the young man who looked vaguely like himself. That young and tender face was very similar to his own. Of course, that was just the appearance. Under his increasingly awakened Vila bloodline, the temperaments of the two were very different. If he had not died at the hands of Dormammu's followers, his soul would not have come that day. However, this might be God's will. Such an identical face is simply a container left by this world for him. Of course, although he is not close to the level of a demon in terms of magic talent, he is also very outstanding. And what is more similar to himself is that he is also a young man who loves reading books. A small part of the entire library has been read by him. Of course, although he has read so many magic books, many of them are just read, which does not mean that he has mastered too much magic. Therefore, Yan Chen did not have a particularly deep understanding of the magic system of this world. He was only able to absorb the elements of the outside world and shape them into various magic weapons. And this is just the most superficial use. Of course, this threshold is already the height that most wizards can reach. But who is Yan Chen? He has an enchanting talent for magic. He is also the youngest magic genius. He makes the geniuses of the same period dim. He is a big man who makes the entire wizarding world tremble. Now he is Yan Chen, so the magic books that he could not understand before will be broken by Yan Chen himself. Moreover, Yan Chen himself can use the meditation basin to continuously come to the memory scenes he read in the library in the past, so as to continue to learn various magics of Kamaji Mahal. What's more terrifying is that his predecessor has read half of the books in the library. So, this also means that Yan Chen can even slowly learn and master this small half of the magic book. How terrifying his strength must have been at that time. At this moment, in this memory fragment, he was reading a book called The Use of Water Element. Just before he finished turning the first few pages, his brows were already tightened and his lips were pursed straight. Obviously, this magic book was already very difficult for him. At this time, Yan Chen had come to his side and looked at the magic book with him. Wow! After the pages were turned, it came to the profound part about how to induce the tides on the sea surface. Yan Chen looked natural, and while looking at it, his 10 fingers on both hands even kept hooking up the elements of heaven and earth to compare and contrast. Open double angle bracket. The magic book, application of water element, is about how to sense the water element in the elements of heaven and earth, and to separate and use it. Wow! The young self in front of him kept flipping the pages of the book, and Yan Chen also read it with him. Compared with the former with a frown on his brow, Yan Chen looked more natural and relaxed. What he is currently reading is the induction chapter in the book. Communicating with the outside world and extracting the elements of heaven and earth, this skill is basically the foundation of every magician here, and it is also the source of their reliance on magic. Of course, if you want to extract a special water element from the very complicated elements of heaven and earth, it is another level of knowledge. However, this seemingly profound knowledge is not difficult for Yan Chen, who has a demonic magic talent. Get up, Yan Chen whispered. His fingertips kept moving, and as the water elements in the world obeyed his instructions like spirits, wisps of white mist emerged from the air in the palm of his hand. The initial communication and induction were just like this, easy to master. Of course, it's not just that. The white mist in the palm of the hand began to change color from white to blue under the dense absorption of water elements. Not long after, the entire mist turned into drops of crystal clear blue water drops. Like a dazzling crystal, it exudes a dazzling luster under the light of the library. The liquid water form did not last long. As Yan Chen's fingers kept waving like a conductor, the entire liquid water suddenly emitted white smoke and turned into a solid blue ice cube. Hiss hiss hiss. The smoke of the ice cube kept making sounds, and the oval shape changed. Whoosh. The ice turned into an ice blade, instantly cut through the air, and flew out violently. In the blink of an eye, it flew out of the window. Come again. A hint of surprise flashed in Yan Chen's pupils. Swish. His mind easily communicated with the water element in the world, and a hexagram magic circle suddenly appeared, and groups of ice cubes appeared in groups. With a finger of Yan Chen's hand, the entire ice block fell from the sky and kept hitting the wall in front of him. Of course, although the ice array's attack was scary, it only splashed layers of ripples on the wall, and then dissipated and disappeared. After all, this is just a scene in a memory fragment, and Yan Chen can't modify anything here at all. Not bad. Yan Chen's pupils flashed a gleam, and the excitement on his face was very obvious. Obviously, the use of the water element was also a great gain for him. Moreover, just now, he not only sensed and communicated with the water element, but also the properties of the gaseous, liquid, and solid states, and finally the shape change of the plasticized ice blade. These are all his achievements after analogy and inference. Of course, this is Yan Chen's so-called terrifying learning talent. However, he read too slowly. Looking at himself in the past, still staying on the page of the method just now, Yan Chen sighed. But it's no wonder. Who said he was gifted? This book, The Use of Water Element, has been studied deeply by himself, but the use of super large-scale spells at the back is also what Yan Chen is interested in. In the magic system of this world, there is still a distinction between white magic and black magic. It's just that the more advanced magic methods are basically passed down from ancient gods and demons. For example, the god of white magic, the Trinity of Vishanti. The god of black magic, Exasong. Thinking of such a vast space for further study and the existence of ancient gods, Yan Chen's desire to study can't help but be ignited. But the speed of him turning the pages of the book is too slow. Yan Chen sighed again. It would be a waste of time to wait here. But there is a way. He only needs to adjust the time again outside the meditation basin, and he can quickly come to the scene where he is flipping through the pages. This is also one of the reasons why he compares the scene in his memory to a movie disc. After all, just like watching adult movies, isn't it normal to speed up the progress of time? Just as Yan Chen was about to go out, hey, a girl in front of him took out a magic book bound by chains from the bookshelf. The chains were engraved with magic patterns. There was no doubt that this was a forbidden book. A forbidden book. This was much more advanced than the magic book he had just read. And Yan Chen looked at the figure who was constantly walking around in the library looking for books, and suddenly he realized, that's right, why did he only stare at himself passing by? There are many people reading books in this library. This means that he doesn't have to hang himself on a tree. Thinking of this, Yan Chen sat next to the woman just now. The two were very close, and even the delicate face was almost touched by Yan Chen, as if they were a couple. But this kind of intimate behavior would not be noticed by outsiders at all. So it doesn't matter. Of course, Yan Chen's mind was not on this girl at all. It's not that he doesn't like women. After all, he had many lovers in his previous life. But because he has the blood of the Vila in his genes, he is very strict with his companions. It is difficult for a beauty like Susan who has both figure and appearance to catch his eye. But in this world, how many companions can compare with Susan? Zhao Hailun's figure inexplicably appeared in his mind. Yan Chen shook his head, cleared his mind of distracting thoughts, and then looked at the cover of the ancient and complex book, which read, Solomon's Key. An ancient spell about the Solomon period. And it was a summoning spell. It contained the ability to freely summon and manipulate demons and spirits. Summoning. Interesting. This thought flashed through Yan Chen's mind. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he also noticed the two people next to him, each holding a magic book, with light steps, and then quietly pulled out the wooden chair, sat up straight and started reading. The book he just started reading. Yan Chen was inexplicably happy, and another bold idea came to his mind. When he was reading a lot of books in Hogwarts in the past, he used time travel, soul out of body, and clone spells to absorb book knowledge with super high efficiency. And now, it is obvious that he can do the same. The doppelganger spell, was written by him personally, so he knew it by heart. After reciting it silently in his heart, two figures emerged from Yan Chen's body and walked towards the two people in front of him. Both the appearance and the figure are exactly the same as Yan Chen himself. At this time, they slowly sat next to the two people and read with them. Since they just started reading, so the cover was printed in their eyes. One is Emerald Slate. Unexpectedly, this is a profound alchemy method. And judging from the appearance of the reader, it is probably out of curiosity. One is Hachi Maiwend Manuscript, which is about how to use the energy of celestial stars. Compared with the use of external elements of heaven and earth, this is undoubtedly more profound and cumbersome. Through the mottled and yellowed pages, the heavy sense of history can be reflected from it, but unfortunately, this is a manuscript. But there is no doubt. These three magic books are right in the heart of Yan Chen, outlining his strong curiosity. Soon, with the passage of time, Yan Chen's face was serious, and his mind was completely immersed in the sea of books. Communicating with the summoning spells of the other world, the alchemy methods in this world, and the induction and application of stellar energy are undoubtedly much more difficult than the methods of water elements. What's more, not only the degree of learning has increased. Yan Chen also separated part of his mind to the clone in order to absorb more knowledge, so that the efficiency of understanding has decreased. However, this is also good. After all, he can't turn the book, and this speed of understanding doesn't need to wait too much time. So, Yan Chen immersed himself in this past memory scene all day long, and his face flashed with a little confusion and distress from time to time, as well as the excitement of clearing the clouds. Of course, he would also adjust the time through the meditation basin to quickly read the next chapter. In a blink of an eye, another day passed. In the meditation room, Yan Chen's flesh and blood body still stayed here. Although his mind and soul were not there, he didn't have to worry about safety. After all, this duplex apartment can be said to be Yan Chen's sanctuary, engraved with words such as sanctuary, Muggle expelling charm, and other magic spells. And more importantly, there is also Zhao Hong, the magic floating cloak, watching over it. So it is extremely safe. Time flies, and it is like this. Through the pensieve, I soaked in the library of Kamaji Mahal for a few days. Yan Chen then remembered that today is an important day. So, after just reading one, he had already walked out of the memory scene. A trace of suppressed and delicate words kept coming from the guest. Even though Hollywood was playing on TV, the two people signed on TV were even more passionate. Susan knelt on the sofa, her waist bent down, but the curve of the curve climbed again from the hips, which showed her curvy figure. At this time, her whole head was buried in the pillow, and she felt like a lonely boat in a storm. The thunder became more and more intense, and she kept tossing up and down in the waves, as if she would face the situation of the hull breaking in the next second. As the rainstorm and thunder resounded to the extreme, the whole ship was thrown high into the sky by the waves. Then it fell heavily. Bang! The next second later, the entire violent stormy night gradually dissipated, and a ray of dawn sunlight spread from the clouds, and this ray of light seemed to shine into Susan's heart, making her feel like she was bathing in the winter sun. On the sofa, Yan Chen hugged Susan's slender waist in silence, and both of them enjoyed the warmth afterwards. Today happened to be the day when Susan was going to the space station. So the two were about to be separated for a few days, so the expressions of the two were extremely devoted, so that they staged a blushing and heart-pounding drama in broad daylight. Take good care of yourself these days. Susan rested her head on Yan Chen's body, quietly listening to his strong heartbeat. After all, compared to Yan Chen, who had amazing magic, his daily life was a mess. Okay, I got it. If I'm not around, you'll have to take care of your own food. Flyers with phone numbers of various takeaway restaurants are posted on the refrigerator. The red one is your favorite Kung Pao chicken, and the blue one is for pizza. The purple one is seafood, the black one is Cantonese cuisine, and the clothes are all thrown into the washing machine. Yan Chen took over her words and continued speaking. After all, this was something she had repeated dozens of times, and Yan Chen had already memorized it by heart. Soon, after the two of them finished listening, they laughed in tacit understanding. Oh no, Susan's expression tensed up, and she realized that the time was almost up, so she hurried into the bathtub to take a bath, then dried her golden hair, and then quietly put on the clothes on the ground. It took her half an hour to finally get up. Okay, I really have to go. Susan bent her waist at the entrance and put on a pair of flat shoes swiftly, but the phone in her white shirt kept vibrating. Do you really not need me to send you off? Yan Chen said, but the Phoenix divine sense had already sensed the vehicle approaching the door. Helen is urging me. She said she's here, Susan said quickly while looking at the message on her phone. She opened the door and saw a slender figure standing next to the Mercedes-Benz sedan outside. Zhao Helen smiled and greeted the two of them. Susan also smiled gracefully, looked at Yan Chen in front of the door and said directly, "Okay, let's stop here. If you send me off again, I'm going to burst into tears." "Okay, goodbye." Yan Chen waved his hand and watched the two of them walk away together. He didn't return to the apartment until the car completely disappeared from his sight. Looking at the empty room, a faint feeling of loneliness suddenly arose. In order to make up for this boring time, Yan Chen certainly had to find something to do. Seeing the sticky red liquid in the magic workshop, Yan Chen remembered that the enhancement potion had not been given to Susan yet. But of course, it was also because she was going to space, so in order to avoid the trouble of not fully adapting to the body, it was temporarily put on hold here. But speaking of it, Susan and Helen and others went to the space department to study the impact of cosmic rays on human life genes, and even wanted to use it to enhance human life and make people stronger and stronger. This is very consistent with the bottle of enhancement potion in his hand. It's just that one is science and the other is magic. Thinking of the wonders of science, Yan Chen couldn't help but be very interested, but when he thought that the road of magic was enough to toss himself, he shook his head and continued to return to the meditation room to study and practice. As soon as Yan Chen entered the room, the magic floating cloak floating on the suspension suddenly swayed and swayed, releasing its kindness. "Okay, thank you for your help." Yan Chen wiped the hair off his skin and came to the meditation basin. His right hand gently touched the silver substance floating in the basin. Then the whole person's soul was sucked in. Buzz. The world began to change constantly, and the surrounding scenery was constantly distorted and stretched. But after a while, Yan Chen came to the slightly quaint library of Kamaji Mahal again. The bookshelves in front of him were filled with mottled and yellowed magic books. Not only that, two of the bookshelves in front of him were filled with ancient forbidden books that were blocked by chains engraved with magic patterns. Every time he swept his eyes, a hint of excitement flashed in Yan Chen's eyes. The knowledge inside is enough to make himself break through to a terrible height. What a pity. You have to eat one bite at a time. You still have to walk one step at a time. Don't be too anxious. The joy in Yan Chen's eyes was restrained. He regained his normal mind and soon separated two figures from his body again, and then read different books respectively. Open double angle bracket the emerald slab. This profound alchemy book, although it could not increase his strength, the refining techniques and potion formulas in it were enough to make people pay attention to it. There were beauty formulas for eternal youth, medical elixirs that invigorated blood circulation and bone growth, and even magic potions that made people violent. Yan Chen took a look and memorized several of the formulas word by word, even every character. Bang! One of the clones disappeared, and now he no longer paid attention to this alchemy book. The most important thing now is to read the application of water element, close double angle bracket, open double angle bracket Kachimoen Codex close double angle bracket, open double angle bracket. The three magic books, the Key of Solomon, were completely memorized. And now, Yan Chen has understood most of the book on the element of water. Compared with the use of astral energy, which is still in the introductory stage, the use of summoning spells and their application has been completely mastered. Yan Chen sighed, but was ready to try the summoning spell tonight. Rubbing his brows, Yan Chen stood up and looked at the scene of the library with interest. In particular, a treasure displayed at the end of the corridor caught his attention. A slightly quaint and shining light was placed on a stone platform. And Yan Chen knew what it was at a glance. The Eye of Agamotto. It is also one of the legendary infinity stones, the Time Stone. Speaking of which, Yan Chen also had such a treasure in the past, that is, the Time Converter. During his study career at Hogwarts, it could allow him to go back to the past to take more magic courses and learn more books in the library. Of course, it is also because the Ministry of Magic is afraid of changes in the timeline, so this time converter can only be used by model students to learn. But that's not all. After Yan Chen graduated from Hogwarts, he even refused a high position in the Ministry of Magic, and instead became an unspoken person in the Department of Mysteries of the Ministry of Magic. Department of Mysteries, an existence that confuses people even in the wizarding world. No one ever knows what they are doing, because their tasks are top secret, and the wizards who work here are called unspoken people. But the greatness of the Department of Mysteries is that it represents the most cutting-edge power in the entire wizarding world. Yan Chen, who has always been committed to breaking through himself, naturally would not take on any ministerial position for fame and fortune, so he ran to the Department of Mysteries. Among the 12 circular rooms in the Department of Mysteries, in addition to the Brain Hall, the Death Hall, the Locked Room, and the Prophecy Hall, in addition to the Planetary Room, Office, etc., there just happens to be a Time Hall. Yan Chen had also stayed there for some time. Although the time was so short that he gained little, it was enough to benefit him for a lifetime. Seeing the time gem at this time, he couldn't help but sigh. The proposition of time is really grand. In the magic world where Yan Chen used to be, there is even a saying that there is a power that is more magical and terrifying than death, human wisdom, and the power of nature. This energy is love. Compared with concepts such as space and time, this love is more abstract and elusive. Of course, countless sages have also used this to create many spells. For example, to summon the guardian god's guard, people need to do their best to remember the happiest time in their lives when casting the spell. Things. Another example is the passive resistance spell, also known as the love spell, an ancient magic, and the most powerful defense. Determined to die to protect others, this can produce a powerful defensive spell that can completely rebound the killing curse and protect the protected object from harm. The famous Voldemort was defeated by this spell. The power of love. Yan Chen suddenly had to savor it carefully, and then shook his mind, and his figure disappeared directly from the scene of this memory. Yan Chen, who returned to the room, planned to complete his first summoning spell on the full moon night today. The entire meditation room suddenly became gloomy and dim. A handful of fresh vampire heart blood was immediately burned by Yan Chen according to the method recorded in Solomon's Key. With the shaking of the candle flame, it gradually burned. Hiss. The air was filled with bursts of bloody smell. Yan Chen then mixed some vampire heart blood with black ink powder to make black blood ink, and then drew a hexagram on the ground. And each corner of the hexagram was lit with a candle. The summoning ritual is ready. Open double angle bracket. Although the Key of Solomon records the ability to freely summon and manipulate demon spirits, as the name suggests, since it is named after Solomon, the summons should naturally be the famous 72 demon gods. But not. This magic book was written by medieval warlocks, so no one can guarantee what the summoned creatures are. Many people even summoned ferocious beasts from the abyss and hell, but they were completely backfired before they could control them, so there are great risks. It is for this reason that it was listed as an ancient forbidden book by Master Ji Yi. Of course, Yan Chen is a skilled and courageous guy with no fear. The ceremony officially begins. 10, 9, 8, 7, 3, 2, 1, launch, boom. A terrifying flame suddenly burst out from the tail of a space shuttle. With the powerful boost fire, the entire behemoth flew straight into the sky. Not long after, the entire space shuttle completely left the atmosphere and arrived at a space station in outer space, and successfully docked with it. Soon, everyone in the space shuttle successfully arrived at the space station. According to the historical process that should have taken place in the past, this should be the original place where the Fantastic Four were born. However, under the fanning of Yan Chen's butterfly wings, this name no longer exists. Reed withdrew for unknown reasons. Of course, Dr. Zhao Helen, who was very interested in the project, took his place. The personnel consisted of genetic scientists Dr. Helen and Susan. The shuttle pilot was Jonathan, who was also Susan's brother, and the other was the bald strong man Ben. Of course, there was also Doom, because he provided most of the research funds. So he was also scolded by Jonathan as a beautician. The beauty smiled at him, but the beauty never showed her teeth to him. Hearing the young man's ridicule, Doom's face looked very ugly, and he stood alone. Of course, he had such an idea in his heart, but more importantly, he was also optimistic about it. This experiment. At this time, Zhao Hailun stood in the space station, looking at the scenery outside through the window. The sun shining with dazzling light made people feel awe, and the vast space in the distance, dotted with vast and mysterious stars, made people fascinated. There are still 9 hours before the cosmic storm arrives. Helen sighed. At this time, astronaut Ben was pulling a silver basin full of four-season plants out of the space station and flew into outer space to test the impact of cosmic rays on life. This is the experiment of their space trip. Studies have shown that exposure to high-energy cosmic storms generated by the coronal solar wind may trigger the evolution of early planetary life, and a cloud with similar characteristics as mentioned above will pass through the Earth's orbit. If research is conducted in space, it will fundamentally advance our understanding of the structure of the human genome, cure countless diseases, prolong life, and allow children to live longer, stronger, and healthier. But at the same time, this storm is deadly, so there are certain risks. Be careful. Helen looked tense, not wanting to make any mistakes. But suddenly, the data on the instrument jumped. The solar storm, which was supposed to arrive 9 hours later, arrived one step ahead of time and would sweep through the entire space station in 5 minutes. Helen's heart jumped, and the accident she was worried about still happened. Fortunately, the space station has a special one, but the astronaut Ben had already walked out. Thinking of this, Helen quickly notified everyone that the crisis had arrived and it was too late to rush back. At this moment, it was even later than the estimated time of the instrument data. The solar storm earlier swept across the entire space station. The outer protective shield of the entire space station was directly eroded by the scorching light, and this light ball filled with such terrifying energy also swept through the people in the space station. Boom! Susan looked desperate, with a trace of tears in her pupils. But this cosmic ray that was enough to corrode and corrupt people continued to surge into their bodies like waves, causing ripples on the surface of their bodies. A strange and unknown change was taking place in their bodies. The genes in their minds were even rewritten for this. Buzz! A storm swept across the scene, and Yan Chen's sleeves and even his cloak were blown rustling. Get up! Yan Chen silently chanted the spell in his heart. As he spoke, the flames of the candles on the corners of the entire hexagram suddenly burst out with a bang, swaying like a red ribbon. Soul of Solomon, in the darkness, under the full moon, I sincerely praise your greatness, and I wish to spread your name with my most sincere praise. Obscure words began to come out of Yan Chen's mouth. As the words gradually burst out, it was as if there was a real magic power, making the wind in the meditation room more and more swell, and the buzzing sound of the storm surged. Indistinctly, there was even a hint of strange sounds of ghosts crying and gods howling. In the whole gloomy and dark environment, it would make people suddenly feel terrified. I wish to call your spirit with my sincerity, please come to this dark place on this full moon night. As the spell got deeper and deeper, the entire hexagram suddenly fell into darkness like a quagmire. After a while, the entire dark quagmire slowly rose up, and the outline of a human body appeared, as if someone had propped up a black curtain underground. Yan Chen was not afraid at all and continued to recite the summoning spell. Soon, the entire rising night curtain was more than a person's height, and the figure hidden underneath was curvy and plump, which was obviously a woman. It's really unreliable. Yan Chen's heart flashed with displeasure. This, Key of Solomon, is really a group of medieval wizards in the name of Solomon. It can't summon the legendary 72 demons at all. Instead, it randomly pulls out some summoned beasts from the abyss of hell. What about this woman in front of him? Yan Chen did not stop chanting the spell, silently chanting the spell. After all, this is his first time to summon a monster. Even if it is a greenhouse girl, he will keep her for commemoration. Please listen to my prayer and come to the world. The chanting finally ended. Feeling the sudden dissipation of most of the magic power in his body, Yan Chen's face turned pale. No wonder there is such a big risk. Even his own existence, which has been transformed by the Phoenix Soul Dragon body, has dissipated so much magic power. Ordinary mages will directly pour out all their magic power, so how can they tame the next monster? And at this moment, with the end of the chanting, the night directly dissipated, and the woman in front of him suddenly revealed her true face. The extremely curvy figure, Coupled with that enchanting face, could it be succubus? Succubus. Yan Chen couldn't help but think of. Wrong. Yan Chen felt a sense of crisis. Swish. The sound of wings opening could not help but be heard, and black wings could not help but spread out from behind the woman. Just as he was about to control the woman in front of him suddenly disappeared with a swish. At the same time, his own shadow on the ground swayed like a flame. Swish. A beautiful figure suddenly emerged from the shadow and pointed directly behind Yan Chen. The figure emerged from the shadow, holding a demon blade in her hand, pointing directly at Yan Chen's back. There was no emotion on that charming and delicate face, as if to her, slaughter was just a common thing. Buzz. The black demon wings on his back fluttered slightly, and the whole person's figure accelerated again, and the blade in his hand had already reached behind him. The figure in front of him did not move at all. On the contrary, he whispered, "It's interesting." Bang! The blade made a clanging sound, and it actually hit the red cloak behind him, splashing out tiny red sparks. Looking at this scene, the woman who came in for a surprise attack suddenly had her pupils constricted. Run! A crisis quietly emerged in her heart. At this time, the red cloak in front of her was actually moving without wind, rolling over like a water curtain. The woman naturally would not feel relaxed because of this silk-like cloak. On the contrary, she had already noticed that this soft fabric was suddenly as solid as a rock after the sudden attack. Without thinking too much, with a swish, her body disappeared again in a very strange way. Whoosh! The red cloak that rushed over actually made a sharp whistling sound in the air, and directly pierced the phantom that remained in place like bubbles. At this time, since the woman disappeared again, the shadows in the entire meditation room have been swinging strangely, just like the swaying of candle flames in the wind. The whole scene suddenly became very strange. The shadowy dark shadows, like a black hand reaching out from the abyss, continued to spread towards Yan Chen in the middle. A trifle, strong light. After witnessing the attack, Yan Chen also understood the principle of it, so he uttered a spell easily. When he recited the spell, his eyes were tightly closed. Buzz! In an instant, a white ball appeared in the middle of the meditation room, and the whole space was suddenly filled with strong white light. All the dark shadows around were immediately driven away. The woman who suddenly disappeared just now also appeared from the corner under this strong light. At this time, her eyes were closed, and her graceful and slender figure was full of wild charm. She reacted in a hurry and flew over fiercely. HMPH. Yan Chen didn't even move. The entire magic floating cloak suddenly extended out and expanded directly. It was just an ordinary cloak style, but in the next second it supported and covered the entire space, and then caught Qian, who was flying towards it. Ah! At this time, the woman finally made a sound. It was as soft as glutinous rice, with a little magnetism. Plop! With a sound, the figure trapped by the cloak suddenly fell to the ground. Under the magical effect of the cloak, the figure wrapped inside lost its own magic and could not use any strength at all. Click! Footsteps came from the ground, and Yan Chen's body had walked forward. Just now, it was just an ordinary and simple strong light spell, which completely forced the woman out. Of course, this also shows that in order to give full play to the effect of magic, you can't blindly follow the difference between high and low, and there is also the saying of whether it is suitable or not. This can also be regarded as a warning to myself for my current expansion of learning magic. And the reason why Yan Chen used the strong light spell just now was naturally because he had already understood the movement law. This woman, it can easily hide in the shadows. Once the shadows are dispelled, its true form will naturally be revealed. This is not a good thing. Yan Chen's figure has approached the woman. As the red cloak fluttered, the whole charming and enchanting face was revealed, and the black hair scattered like clouds made the face look even whiter and more delicate. When he first saw it, Yan Chen thought that this enchanting face was a succubus that enchanted everyone. But seeing her ability to lurk in the shadows in an instant and the pair of black devil wings, he denied the guess at once. And if you look at this face carefully, you can see the difference. The heroic spirit between the eyebrows, the coldness in the eyes, and the tightly pursed red lips are as straight as a sword, and they also exude an absolute coldness like a sword. At first glance, it exudes the beauty that fascinates everyone. But when you look closely, you find that this woman exudes the coldness that keeps people away. The seductive charm, The coldness of an iceberg. These two very different temperaments are perfectly integrated into one face. It is really a gift that makes women jealous. At this time, the woman did not have the consciousness of a prisoner. Instead, she still stared at Yan Chen with a pair of cold pupils. Yan Chen remained silent, and then silently chanted the last spell in his heart. Summoning monsters from the abyss, hell or other dimensional spaces is only the first procedure. And then, the most important thing is to mark your own soul. Let her truly become your own summoned monster. Of course, this is also an important step for the mages to fall. As far as the situation just now is concerned, they may not have time to chant the spell and put on the shackles, and they will be completely killed by the summoned monsters. But Yan Chen has long been aware of the risks. Not only is there a shelter outside the body, armor protection spell, and other spells, more importantly, he also has the magic floating cloak that is said to be absolutely defensive. Zhao Hong, who has her own consciousness, does not need to control herself at all, and directly faces the enemy head-on, which makes Yan Chen extremely relaxed. At this time, Yan Chen silently recited the last spell. The woman who was still cold and beautiful just now seemed to feel something and began to panic, but the magic floating cloak outside her body made it impossible for her to struggle. Quote. Your soul, flesh and blood, everything, will be dedicated to the master without reservation. The promise of this life will never be violated. As the last words were finished, a wisp of pale soul filament suddenly penetrated the smooth eyebrows of the woman in front of him and was imprinted in Yan Chen's mind. As Yan Chen absorbed it, a fire totem suddenly appeared between the eyebrows of the woman. That was a sign that her phoenix soul controlled all her words, deeds, life and death. And her long and cumbersome demon real name also fell into his hands. Each real name is the weakness of the demons. Once it falls into the hands of others, it will inevitably be a dead end. Arya. Yan Chen also quickly gave her a name. Yan Chen silently picked a name from her long demon real name. After hearing this name, the woman below clenched her teeth, frowned, and even sweat covered her smooth forehead, as if she was enduring great pain in her mind. Finally, as the fire totem between her eyebrows was perfectly engraved and lifelike, the whole tense expression relaxed, and the delicate face that was as cold as frost was also full of sad and beautiful feelings, and then a pair of cold eyes still stared at Yan Chen. Despicable and shameless. After a while, Arya uttered the words softly. The soft and magnetic words made people feel itchy. Moreover, she had found that she was completely controlled by this man, and she could not even have the intention to kill him in her heart. Her whole body and mind had fallen into his control. Yan Chen raised his eyebrows, and when his phoenix soul completely imprinted the soul in her mind. This woman has officially become his first summoned monster. Thinking of her ability just now, Yan Chen couldn't help but understand her ability from the soul. Arya came from the Abyss Demon Realm, a space where chaos and evil never stop. Although she has a charming and delicate face and a plump and tight figure, she is just a mutant of the succubus with the ability to manipulate shadows. The body can lurk in an instant, into any shadow in this world. Moreover, she can manipulate shadows to carry out substantial manipulation and attacks. These were all reflected in the fight just now. What's more terrifying is that she can also create a shadow space around her, dragging the entire area into absolute darkness, giving her an absolute advantage. However, this big move was captured by Yan Chen before it could be released. Shadow Girl. Although her ability is not extremely exaggerated to destroy the world, she is a master of lurking and attacking. If it were someone else just now, they would have died silently under her sharp blade. However, the revenge for the sneak attack just now must be avenged. Yan Chen gently wiped her delicate face with his hand. The touch that was filled with the feeling of being blown away made people imagine the whiteness and delicateness of the skin. Let me go, Arya said in panic. The magic cloak covering her body suddenly floated away. Although her body gained mobility, under the command of Yan Chen's soul, she could not move at all. After becoming a contract summon, Arya's behavior was immediately controlled by him. Let me repay you with one sword just now. Yan Chen is a man of revenge. If she hadn't been caught by the cloak, this woman would have escaped with the help of her shadow. You. With a crisp sound, Arya's tight black leather jacket was torn to pieces by a hand. No. The icy expression on the woman's face suddenly revealed a rare panic. Yan Chen paid no attention to it. Susan was not around, and he hadn't had an appetite for a long time. What's more, the woman in front of him, who was full of charm and enchantment, and whose every frown and smile was provocative, reminded him of his lover in his previous life. He knew how crazy this kind of beauty could be. After a muffled groan, Arya gritted her teeth and turned her face away coldly. Feeling the mischievous hand under the leather jacket and the two legs that were gradually pulled apart, her face was panicked, but it was filled with a rosy color as if she was drunk. Waves of restless heat surged in her body, and her heart also produced an inexplicable response to this. Her originally stiff and straight body softened and slowly obeyed the actions of the man on her. Arya's face flushed and she closed her eyes tightly. Although she was resisting and struggling in her heart, she could not resist the bloodline and nature of the fallen race of the abyss. Just as the two were about to have further relations. Ding-a-ling ding-a-ling, the sound of a cell phone vibrating came from Yan Chen's clothes. Yan Chen couldn't help but stop what he was doing. His first reaction was to ignore it, but this phone was handed to him by Susan before she left. She was the only one who knew the number, so no one else knew it except her. Thinking of this sudden call, Yan Chen felt panic inexplicably. Then he answered the call. A strange voice came from the other end. "Excuse me, are you Susan's family member? I'm a doctor at the Columbia University Hospital in New York. I'm sorry, I wanted to inform you that Susan is in trouble." What? Before he finished speaking, a violent pressure suddenly erupted from Yan Chen's body, and the glass mirror in the distance shattered instantly. Even Arya under his body turned pale under this dragon's might. The doctor on the other end of the line, although separated by 2 places, said inexplicably in this momentum, "Mr." Crack. The phone in his hand was crushed directly. Susan was in trouble at the space station. Yan Chen didn't care about this half-dressed beauty. He stood up straight, and with a series of crackling sounds, his whole body disappeared from the spot like a phantom. New York Columbia and Cornell Presbyterian Hospital. As an affiliated hospital of Columbia University Medical School, it can be regarded as the top hospital in New York. Ta-ta-ta. Yan Chen's footsteps kept knocking in the hospital corridor, accompanied by a nurse as a guide. The young and beautiful nurse looked at the elegant man next to her and wanted to strike up a conversation with him, but after seeing his extremely cold expression, she gave up the idea. "The intensive care unit is in front of us," the nurse said softly, and then took a step forward, preparing to open the door with the electromagnetic card in her hand. As an intensive care unit, no one is allowed to enter. But before she could press the card, the door opened automatically without wind, and Yan Chen went in. "Hey," the nurse was stunned, looking at the magnetic card in her hand, and then at the door that suddenly opened. Did she press it just now? Yan Chen, who had stepped forward, looked at the beautiful figure on the sickbed, and her heart trembled. Her delicate face was pale at this time. Yan Chen couldn't help but sit beside her and hold her hand tightly. An inexplicable magic power continued to flow into her body. At the same time, Susan, who was still drowsy just now, suddenly opened her eyes. Well, Susan's eyes rippled, and her pale face instantly turned rosy. Feeling the strength of her right hand clenching tightly, she couldn't help but look at the person beside the bed. When she found that it was Yan Chen, whom she had been thinking about for a long time, she smiled sweetly. "I must be dreaming. However, I still made you worry," Susan said with all her heart. Yan Chen patted her hands, motioning her to rest assured, and then said, "It's good that you're fine. There's nothing wrong with your body." However, under his magic check just now, although his body was fine, he seemed to sense an inexplicable energy. It was hazy, as if it was an illusion, and it was gone in a flash before he could catch it. "But if you want to check it thoroughly, it will take some time, and the public places here are not very convenient." Thinking of the confusion, Yan Chen did not tell Susan at the first time, so as not to make her worry. At this time, there was a knock on the door, and then a figure walked in. The whole person was wearing a long white coat, but it could not hide the graceful and slender figure underneath. On a fair and delicate oriental face, there was a gentle and quiet temperament. Who else could be such a beautiful woman with such temperament except Zhao Hailun? "Helen, are you okay?" Susan sat up when she saw the person coming and asked with great concern. Helen smiled gracefully and said, "It's nothing serious. Seeing that there was still one person in the ward, Helen was surprised, and then she said with a little apology, "It's my fault, otherwise how could this happen?" After that, she lowered her head, looked at the information in her hand, and said, "There are no problems with various vital indexes, and the complete blood count shows that it is not affected by radiation. Everyone is fine. Of course, it is best to be discharged from the hospital for one more day." Of course, the last sentence was said to Yan Chen. Although he was a little anxious to get Susan out of the hospital, Yan Chen nodded when he thought of the fleeting inexplicable power in Susan's body. Of course, he stayed in the hospital with her. Zhao Hailun, who obtained a doctorate from Columbia Medical School. At the same time, she is also a world-renowned biological genetic scientist. Naturally, she also has a certain status in the affiliated hospital, so the accommodation and meals of several people are all of the highest standards. The hospital restaurant in front of them is like a luxurious Western restaurant, full of dignified and majestic style. When Yan Chen and the other two sat down, Benkai, who was also a travel companion on the side, came late and came to the restaurant. His face was still full of lingering fears. Obviously, the sudden solar storm in the space still made him unable to let go. Everyone talked to each other. However, they haven't eaten half of it yet. This man who looks very strong and solid, with a slightly pale face, can't help but shake off the cutlery in his hand during the tremor. Looking at the sights of everyone, he couldn't help but stand up and said, "I think I'm full." As soon as the voice fell, the figure quickly appeared in the restaurant. Susan and Helen didn't think much about it. But Yan Chen frowned. The guy opposite just now had a strange energy in his body, which was exactly the same as what Susan found in her body. Cosmic energy. Yan Chen had this question in his mind. As someone who had just read the Hachimaiwen manuscript, he had a vague understanding of this kind of celestial energy. He wanted to stand up and follow the strong man to investigate. But that inexplicable energy suddenly gushed out of Susan's body again. Moreover, this time the energy fluctuation seemed to have broken through some kind of shackles, and it was more violent and turbulent than before. A wonderful change was born and nurtured in her body. Susan. Yan Chen looked at her seriously and said slowly, "Honey, why are you looking at me like that?" Susan was stunned, but she looked at him and said. When she saw where his eyes were pointing, Susan couldn't help but look down. She saw that her hands were blurry and transparent, completely disappeared, so that the watch on her right arm seemed to be floating in the air. This strange sight immediately made Helen on the opposite side exclaim, "Susan, you." Seeing her best friend's horrified expression, Susan couldn't help but look at the mirrored glass on the side, only to see her coat, jewelry and necklaces, floating in the air, and her flesh and blood body had completely disappeared. Invisible. Invisible. Yan Chen sighed. This was indeed the power of invisibility. Seeing her slightly panicked look, he couldn't help but comfort her. "Relax your mind and try to accept your ability instead of resisting it." He saw that there was no harm in the cosmic energy that merged into Susan's body. Instead, it allowed her to gradually possess supernatural powers. However, Susan was still very nervous as she watched her invisible figure disappear. She reached out and held Yan Chen's right hand to encourage her, feeling the heat from her palm. Susan couldn't help but relax her mind. The invisible figure gradually rippled like the surface of the water, and then her clear and white flesh and blood skin was revealed very clearly. Yan Chen. Susan, who had regained her true form, could not help but say with a little excitement that after the initial nervousness, she suddenly realized that she might no longer be immortal. Is the gap in status between me and Yan Chen no longer that big of a gap? It's okay. This can be said to be a blessing. Yan Chen patted her and said. Seeing this weird scene, Helen was not as relaxed as Yan Chen. After seeing Susan recover, she sighed in her heart. At this time, bang, the door of the restaurant was heavily opened, and a young and handsome white guy ran in, his face full of excitement and said, "Sister, sister. Look what happened to me. Look." After he finished speaking, a small flame suddenly emerged from his palm. Helen's eyes could not help but glance over. Looking at this wonderful fire ability, she was slightly surprised in her heart, and at the same time, a guess inexplicably came to her mind. Perhaps it was the cosmic rays that completely transformed their physiques, causing their genes to complete a wonderful mutation, so that Susan had invisibility and Jonathan had fire. What would she have? Before she could figure it out, a roar came from a distance. Chapter 51. Everyone noticed something was wrong, and immediately stood up and rushed to the ward where Ben was. Since it was almost late at night, there were not many people in the hospital at this time, so they arrived at the door of the ward without any obstruction. Bang bang bang. There was a continuous loud knocking on the door. Jonathan clapped his hands and kept saying, "Ben, what's wrong with you? This is an intensive care unit, so no one needs a password or magnetic card to enter, and it's not so convenient for them to enter." At this time, there were several loud noises in the ward, as if something was smashed. Hearing the noise inside, Susan's eyes couldn't help but look at Yan Chen. Yan Chen squeezed her hand tightly, then nodded as if to reassure her. Bang bang. As the knocking became more intense, the door suddenly opened. Jonathan didn't think much about it, thinking that he had just knocked the smart door open, and then he took a step and rushed directly into the ward. But Helen, who was left behind, was confused, because just now, she saw the little action of Susan and the others. Before she could think about it carefully, look, a cry of surprise came from inside. Everyone filed in, only to find that the outer wall of the entire hospital had completely collapsed and cracked, leaving a wide and thick hole. The ward in front of them was empty, and it was obvious that they had already escaped from this hole. Looking at the four legs of the bed that had completely collapsed, the footprints that were nearly a foot deep on the ground, and the hole in the wall, Yan Chen more or less understood what abilities this guy had. This was obviously the consequence of a sudden surge in power. The sudden surge in power made him unable to control it, and it might even have brought about some changes in his appearance, so that he could not accept himself, so he fled directly. As Yan Chen, who had successfully transformed into a giant dragon, he had a deep understanding of this. "Maybe I need your help," a voice asked. Yan Chen didn't think much about it, but took over the conversation and said, "No, let him calm down and accept it first." Something suddenly occurred to Yan Chen, and he looked at Helen. Her delicate and pretty face was full of cunning. It was obvious that the words just now were just a test for him. What a smart woman. But he didn't care, otherwise he wouldn't have given her a bottle of soothing agent to dispel the shadow in her heart. As expected, she was a mysterious person, and she put away the triumphant look on her face. At this time, Susan had already understood it, and said, "It's because of the cosmic rays in space. We have gained all kinds of superpowers because of the large amount of radiation." Helen's slender fingers wrapped around her ears, nodded in agreement, and said, "So it's no wonder that we couldn't detect any changes in our bodies at the beginning. It turns out that our genes may have been rewritten." But at this time, Jonathan reacted and said, "My sister and I have both undergone mutations, and Ben, that guy, no need to think too much, must be the same." "What is your ability then?" Looking at the curious eyes cast at her, Helen shook her head, her pretty face also full of confusion, and said, "I don't know either, it seems that I have not successfully stimulated my ability." "No," Yan Chen interrupted at this time. In his pupils, he could clearly feel the drastic changes in Helen's body. At this moment, a large amount of energy was surging under that graceful figure. In the invisible field of vision, various external energies actually caused ripples on her body surface, and then slowly merged into her body. Although the absorbed energy is weak and tiny, it is like a silent moistening of the earth, and it is really integrated into her body. Hearing Yan Chen's voice at this time, everyone looked over. Jonathan reacted and said, "You can't be. He must be my sister's boyfriend. Hey, I've heard of you. They say you're good at Chinese kung fu. But now I am not afraid of you. So don't bully my sister." After saying that, he proudly lit the fireworks with his hands. Susan's face was full of rosy color, and she folded her arms, looked at him seriously, and said, "Say less." 3 points of the rosiness on her face were because she was embarrassed to see her family, and the other 7 points were because she was embarrassed for her brother. She knew everything about him and understood very well that the fire ability alone could not compare with her man. This kind of thing of trying to shake a tree with an ant, it makes people feel embarrassed just thinking about it. After hearing this, Helen looked at Yan Chen and said, "Then what is my ability?" "If I guessed correctly, your ability is energy absorption and release. So it's not surprising that you can't feel it." Although the words were very humble, the look on Yan Chen's face was extremely confident. Energy, everyone present said in confusion. Helen, why don't you try to slap the wall with your hands? Yan Chen directly reminded him. Helen, who knew a little about his mystery, looked at his calm and confident expression, and felt convinced in her heart. She took a deep breath, and then slapped the wall with her hands. Bang! A crisp sound was heard. And when the palm touched the wall, ripples appeared in the palm of her hand, and the strong collision kinetic energy immediately merged into the body like a mud cow into the sea. Plop! Feeling the sudden infusion of energy, the heart in the body couldn't help but beat strongly. The right hand slapped hard, but it only turned slightly red. Instead of feeling any pain, Helen felt a huge force surge through her limbs. This was really the energy she had absorbed from kinetic energy. Helen's face lit up with joy. Not only that, the absorbed energy even gave birth to a huge force in her body. Great! Susan didn't ask any more questions, just looked at her face and immediately knew that it worked. Really? Jonathan asked doubtfully, then looked at his sister's boyfriend, and kept examining his extraordinary appearance. Could this guy be a charlatan? How did he know? After Helen realized her ability, she was delighted, but she was inexplicably nervous when she thought of Ben running away. After all, he was their teammate. So they also made up their minds to look for Ben early tomorrow morning. A Mercedes-Benz car was about to drive slowly onto the Manhattan Bridge. But there were crashing sounds not far away. The smooth road in front of her suddenly stopped. Through the window, Susan could see people getting off the cars on the bridge. How terrifying. There is a monster in front of us. Found it. It's really here, Susan said with a little joy. Jonathan in the car said to Yan Chen with a suspicious look on his face, "Hey. How can you be sure that Ben is here?" Yan Chen's expression did not change, he just held up the mobile phone in his right hand, smiled and said to him, "This is what the internet said. You know, it's hard to hide things in this world from the internet, especially a guy with the appearance of orange stone." Really, Jonathan's doubts were still not resolved. Although he was naughty, he was also a top student like his sister, and he had even served as an astronaut, so naturally he had a high IQ. Ever since he met Yan Chen, he always felt that something was wrong. He always felt that this person seemed to be covered with a hazy veil, full of mystery. Yan Chen ignored his surprise and continued to play with the phone in his hand. In the past, this was a very rare thing, but since he had planned to perfectly integrate into the whole society, many human high technologies began to slowly master them. At this time, there happened to be a news about Tony Stark on the news column on the mobile phone screen. Yan Chen was inexplicably curious and couldn't help but click on it. It was news about this guy announcing that he was Iron Man. Yan Chen did not comment on this matter. Of course, he might be inclined to not agree with it because he was low-key by nature. After all, fame and fortune were too light for him. At this time, Helen saw that the road ahead was completely blocked and the car could not move forward at all, so she immediately said, "Let's go over." After all, Ben is still in front, and there seems to be a chain car accident in front. No problem. Everyone had no objection, so everyone ran slowly forward. However, the crowds of pedestrians on the road ahead made it difficult for everyone to pass. "Can you please make way for me?" Helen said with concern. But the crowd in front of her seemed to be joining in the fun and were unwilling to leave. Moreover, the scene was a little noisy, and the voices were drowned out by the constant honking of the horns. But after a while, Helen looked helpless. "Follow me." At this time, a faint voice was clearly heard by everyone. Yan Chen silently carried Susan's slender body, and before he began to squeeze into the crowd, the people in front of him began to retreat and leave. They all looked very nervous, as if something big had happened at home, so that they no longer had the intention to join in the fun. Jonathan's face was filled with more doubts. Hearing the words, "The gas is not turned off at home, wife giving birth, his grandson was beaten at school." He couldn't help but laugh. What is all this? How come all of a sudden, the people in front of him all have emergencies at home? Looking at the tall man standing in front of him, Jonathan couldn't help but feel a little awe in his heart. Where did his sister find a boyfriend? Helen also saw the scene in front of her, ripples appeared in her pupils, and her curiosity became more and more intense. This guy can really give people surprises. Soon, Everyone came to the middle section of the bridge, which is the scene of the serial car accident. And here, there was already a group of policemen surrounding the front, surrounding a weirdo who looked like an orange stone. Jonathan couldn't help but shout, "Ben!" hearing someone calling his real name. The stone man couldn't help but look over there, looking at his companions in the space station with surprise, only to find that these companions did not change in appearance like him. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel unspeakable bitterness in his heart. And just last night, his girlfriend couldn't accept him with his body full of stone bumps. Looking at the crowd surrounding him, he felt like a clown in a circus. With this association, he made up his mind to leave quickly. But before he could take a step, hiss, a tiny flame suddenly fell into the gasoline. One of the vehicles involved in the chain accident just now happened to be a gas truck. Suddenly, with a bang, a ball of wild and swollen flames suddenly exploded on the bridge, and the smoke went straight into the sky. Boom! Such a horrible flame explosion, the shock wave generated by it even overturned many vehicles into the sky. At the same time, a burst of orange-red fireworks suddenly spread out, and in the blink of an eye, it was about to swallow up everyone in front of him. Yan Chen raised his right hand hanging from his waist slightly. Invisible waves spread out. There were ripples in the air as if there were real ripples, and the water elements in the sky suddenly became dense. The momentum of the water and fire collision was only waiting for his thought to respond. But, buzz! To her surprise, Susan at the side of him had a light blue protective shield erupting from her body. Under the scorching flames, the ripples on the protective shield fluctuated unsteadily, and were full of tiny cracks, as if it would completely shatter like a mirror in the next second. "Come on," Yan Chen said tenderly. Unexpectedly, in such a scene, she would burst out with a new ability. In order to fully stimulate her potential, the idea of taking action just now was completely abandoned. Listening to Yan Chen's words, Susan pursed her lips tightly, and then with her hands, she suppressed all the gushing flames. Seeing her impressive ability results, Susan couldn't help but feel happy. Helen on the other side also changed her expression slightly. The flames just now came at her face, but waves of hungry swallowing came from her body, and she actually absorbed the free heat energy and surging kinetic energy in the air. She even felt that as long as she encouraged herself, she could erupt the flames she had just absorbed. This is simply, it was crazy. Nearby, Ben Grimm, the stone man, used all his strength to grab the fire truck that was about to fall on the edge of the bridge. Even with his huge body, he was no match for the fire truck. However, this guy actually grabbed the entire fire truck weighing several tons and pulled it back from the edge of the bridge. All these amazing abilities were captured by helicopters in the air. Some media even called it Fantastic Four. A ladder truck of the New York Fire Department unfortunately became part of the tragedy, but the focus today is not on the rescue. These four of them are all amazing. One can master energy absorption, one can open a protective stance, and the other has infinite strength. It is understood that their abilities were developed due to exposure to cosmic rays in the space station. Many media personnel even called them the Fantastic Four. The voice of the TV broadcast kept coming. What? The Fantastic Four? Susan was shocked. If it weren't for her attention-seeking brother spreading the news everywhere, she wouldn't have known that she had become a member of the superhero group. At this time, 1 day had passed since their rescue on the Manhattan Bridge. In just 1 day, the news about the Fantastic Four overwhelmed the popularity of Tony admitting that he was Iron Man. After all, the rumors about Tony had long been speculated, and it was expected that it would be confirmed this time. So this certainly can't be compared with scientists accidentally becoming superheroes. Of course, the Fantastic Four in this world have also changed because of Yan Chen's arrival, Reed's appearance, Helen's joining, but because of the lack of a strong link, the entire Fantastic Four looks more like a name in name only. Beep. Susan picked up the remote control button and turned off the TV directly. "Come on, start showing your abilities," Yan Chen said with a smile. He was very interested in this unexpected ability. "Okay, soon." Susan was in the middle of the living room, but she seemed to be wearing only a white shirt. She exhaled lightly, and came to her senses. Buzz. A blue ring-shaped protective shield slowly emerged from her body. When it touched an object, ripples appeared on the surface of the shield, and soon the whole living room was covered by it. "This is mine. It's the limit." Susan was a little out of breath, and her slender waist swayed slightly like a willow in the wind. Very good. Yan Chen touched the light blue protective shield with his hand, feeling the fluctuations and strength in it, and nodded. This was enough to resist many bomb attacks. Moreover, he also had an enhancement potion in his hand to further demonstrate Susan's ability. Good, let's try to be invisible next. Susan nodded after hearing this, and then she put away the protective shield that was gushing out of her body, took a breath, and with a thought, her entire body and skin disappeared like air. But the clothes on his body did not disappear with his invisibility. So, Yan Chen smiled. Ah, Susan's voice was as soft as a mosquito's. Wow, with human eyes alone, it is impossible to see that there is someone hiding under the air in front of you. If Yan Chen did not have a unique phoenix soul, he might not have noticed that there was still someone in the living room. Time passed little by little. Susan had disappeared for more than 10 minutes with the help of the invisible force field, which was a lot better than when the ability first appeared. According to Helen's scientific point of view, Susan can control and distort the light waves around her to become invisible, and it is because of this that she can support the protective position. However, if you want to analyze it further, you have to go to Helen's house in the next few days to check it carefully. At this time, the invisibility time has reached its limit. Empire State Building. This is one of the tallest buildings in Manhattan. Due to its long historical status and cultural atmosphere, many companies use the high-rise floors for office work. On one of the floors, a figure sat on the sofa silently. Although the light was dim, the fire from the fireplace still showed his angular and handsome face. But his sinister expression wiped out a lot of his handsomeness. And this is Doom. At this moment, he looked through the office window and saw the entire office area outside. If it were the case in the past, many people in the entire company would stay here to work overtime, but tonight, not only is no one willing to stay, as the shareholders withdraw their capital, most of the staff even resigned in the morning. Is he finished? You Latvian, you are a country bumpkin, get out of here. The voice of the major shareholder came from the edge of my mind. The entire company, which was valued at billions of dollars in the future, collapsed and broke down as shareholders withdrew their capital. The fuse of all this, in addition to the previous investment failure, was also because the space program that cost most of the money failed completely. Not only did it not study the secrets of human genes, but it only accidentally created a few superheroes. No, this space mission did not fail. Doom thought viciously. He thought that he was the best because he had assets that were as rich as a country and had power admired by thousands of people. But he was wrong. Doom looked at the skin of his right hand, which was made of metal, and then pressed it hard on the ground. Invisible electromagnetic waves instantly covered the entire office floor, and then the hot lights on the entire floor went out instantly. Ah! Doom roared, the electric light in his hand flashing continuously. As the power spread further, the lights of the nearly 400-meter-high floors of the entire Empire State Building gradually went out one by one. After a while, the entire building was perfectly integrated into the darkness. Doom showed a ferocious smile. He now understood that only those who hold supreme power in their hands can be considered superior to others. It's time to settle accounts. Those who look down on me and those who snatch the love from my heart must all die. Susan and Yan Chen were rushing to Helen's home hand in hand, preparing for the next step of testing, because after all, this was a genetic mutation caused by cosmic ray radiation, and no one could guarantee whether there were any risks. Although Yan Chen was convinced that the energy was stable, since it was related to Susan's life, he still silently accompanied her to the test. Since Helen's studio was in Manhattan, the two did not choose to travel directly through space. Spreading on the streets of Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, the eyes of the people around couldn't help but look at them frequently. Although the two were handsome men and beautiful women with extraordinary temperament, they had never attracted such a large number of eyeballs in the past. Is there something wrong with my face? Susan held Yan Chen's arm tightly. Such a focused gaze made her a little nervous. Not really. It's because you are too beautiful. Yan Chen praised faithfully. Perhaps nourished by love and men, that delicate and pretty face is filled with dazzling brilliance, and the graceful and slender figure reveals a rich charm. Susan turned her head and said like a cute little cat, it's just. There are still a lot more than before. At this time, a cry of surprise came from the mouth of a middle-aged lady. Isn't this Miss Storm? Is it really her? She's the girl who can turn invisible. Oh, it's definitely her. For a moment, the entire crowd that was still confused just now suddenly burst into enthusiastic cheers and rushed towards Susan. Looking at the crowd that came to chase stars, Susan was full of surprise. She didn't expect that her reputation was so well known. Of course, this undoubtedly brought her some troubles. Run! Susan took Yan Chen's hand and ran out to the street. Looking at the crowd coming again in front of him, Yan Chen just smiled, and then a wave of magic power spread out from his body, completely covering the two of them. Driven by invisible magic, the two completely disappeared from everyone's sight. She is invisible, she should still be here. Everyone's voices could not help but come. But what they didn't know was that a red cloak continued to extend like a wave of water curtain, climbing straight into the sky, and Yan Chen took Susan's slender little hand and slowly stepped on the floating cloak. As the cloak flew and floated, it flew directly into the air. Wow! Susan exclaimed. Although she had a solid support under her feet, she still squeezed into Yan Chen's arms. Space travel is a common thing on weekdays, but it is the first time to fly in the air like this. After enjoying the entire Manhattan city from a bird's eye view, the two finally arrived at Helen's office in Manhattan, which is also a famous laboratory of Columbia University Medical School, directly affiliated with Helen. Bang! The door slowly closed. The two entered the room. The interior of the building was no different from an ordinary laboratory. It was made of the same simple white material and looked very clean. However, as Helen, who is world-renowned at a young age, she is naturally a workaholic. Her accommodation area is above the studio floor. Work and life are inseparable, which is why Susan wants her to move out. At this time, a group of people in white coats were testing the power of the stone man. "Punch this piece of metal with all your strength," said the graduate student in a gown. The stone man took a deep breath. Although his appearance became full of bumps and stones, it also gave him extremely terrifying power. Bang! He took a step forward, and then punched the metal hard. The air even had some ripples during the collision. The strength index bar on the computer screen instantly soared. More than 500 kilograms. The operator gasped. The starting point of this force was so high. You know, this force is more than enough to kill someone. More than 700 kilograms. More than 800 kilograms. In just 1 second, it reached this reading. The researcher sighed. This is the height reached by a top heavyweight boxer. While he was speaking, the entire reading had reached more than 2,000 kilograms. The researcher looked at the reading that was still rising sharply and said in a trembling voice, "This is already. It has exceeded the height that humans can theoretically reach." The operator on the side retorted, "Wrong. This is a power reading that exceeds that of all known creatures. Of course, except for that Hulk guy." After saying that, he looked at the value that showed nearly 10,000 at the end and added. Susan also sighed and said, "What a terrifying power." As her sweet words came out, everyone realized that two people had come from behind. A group of researchers in white coats lit up when they saw Susan, but when they saw her holding a man with her little hand, they couldn't help but feel very disappointed. At this time, the operator just now stood up and said to Yan Chen, "Aren't you the one? The guy who punched the lizard monster away?" Since Zhao Hailun was the doctoral supervisor of their group of researchers, and he was also present, he couldn't help but recognize Yan Chen, who performed well at the graduation ceremony. Everyone understood the lizard monster, the latest super criminal in New York, and when they heard that this Chinese youth had the strength to knock down the terrifying lizard, they couldn't help but be very interested. "Hey, how about trying your own strength?" a researcher said. In fact, he had no good intentions. The value tested by the stone man just now could be said to be an unclimbable height, so no matter what the test results were, they were destined to be low. Yan Chen didn't have so many small thoughts. Seeing that Helen and Susan around him seemed interested, he didn't bother to try it. Soon, one force conductor and receiver after another were attached to the right arm. This is also their way of testing strength. Through the conduction of the neural instrument, the force of the arm muscles can be directly tested. Seeing this scene, even the stone man who was about to test his body muscles stopped inexplicably. After he was ready, Yan Chen looked relaxed, and he didn't even deliberately accumulate strength. Because the slowly recovering dragon blood in his body is enough for him to despise everything. Bang! A punch slammed down. The air also shook inexplicably. The power index value on the screen was even more exaggerated, which directly shocked the operator and said, saturation. In other words, it exceeds the cognition of the instrument. Isn't this more exaggerated than the stone man? After saying this, a pair of eyes were filled with panic, looking at Yan Chen as if he had seen a ghost. Exceeding the test level of the instrument. The operator's words shocked the whole audience. You know, even the stone man's unparalleled martial arts can be roughly tested, but this Chinese youth actually possesses such terrifying power. How is it possible? Is he still a human? The people around couldn't help but tremble. But at this time, one of the researchers shouted, that's because the machine is broken. Following his line of sight, you can see wisps of green smoke coming out of the instrument, accompanied by a burst of fine hissing sounds, and the entire instrument began to splash sparks. Even the power index value just now began to jump continuously. The operator immediately said apologetically, I'm so sorry. It seems the instrument must be wrong. That's why the power reading is wrong. After hearing this, the people around couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief and said, no wonder. Couldn't you have said it in advance? So that's why the instrument went wrong. That is, now think about it, a mortal's strength reading can actually exceed the instrument's cognition. Do you think he is a Superman? Relieved words suddenly broke out in the crowd. Everyone looked at Yan Chen's eyes and felt relieved. Of course, whether the saturation peak of the strength index value just now was caused by Yan Chen's punch or by the failure of the instrument, everyone obviously tended to the latter. But it's no wonder. After all, in everyone's cognition, a young man whose body is not as big as the stone man, how could he hit a higher force than him? The stone man also breathed a sigh of relief, and then rushed to another room to fully check his body. Yan Chen ignored the eyes of the people around him. He just removed the conductor attached to his arm, looked at the square metal that was hid in front of him, and said, what is this thing? Vibranium. A crisp female voice suddenly came. Zhao Hailun, who was also wearing a lab coat, came over slowly. The white coat that was longer than the knees made her long legs look tight and slender. At this time, she patted the square metal and said, this can be regarded as an alloy that is almost indestructible, because this metal can absorb energy. After that, Hailun couldn't help but think that this metal was exactly the same as her own ability. After listening to it, Yan Chen also knew that vibranium did have miraculous effects. Although only part of the bloodline power was awakened just now, the dragon's strength is extraordinary. Even if it leaked a little, it would not be blocked by an ordinary metal. When he was about to leave, someone suddenly said, has Hailun bet? Helen, who was slightly shocked at this time, shook her head and said, it's okay. After saying that, a pair of slender and smooth fingers slowly withdrew from the surface of the vibranium. As Helen walked away, she looked at Yan Chen meaningfully. Just now, she, who had the ability to absorb energy, actually sensed a surging force from the vibranium metal. This guy, it really gives people a surprise. Okay, Susan, follow me. Helen sorted out her complicated thoughts and waved to Susan. Susan immediately took Yan Chen's hand and followed Helen to a laboratory. As soon as they entered the room, Helen picked up a dark blue fiber bodysuit and handed it to Susan. This is not. That's right. This is the tights you wear when you are in space, and it has also changed under the cosmic rays. After I processed it last night, it has the ability to become invisible with you. Before Helen finished her clear voice, she was hugged by Susan, who was full of joy. After all, it was too unbearable to take off all your clothes to become invisible. Of course, Yan Chen understood this very well. In the invisibility class he taught Susan yesterday, she was raped several times by him because she was naked. Okay. Helen patted her on the back and continued, not only that, this piece of clothing also has a certain degree of ductility and extremely strong fire resistance, so this is the second gift God has given us. After the two exchanged some pleasantries, they were ready to start testing Susan's ability. Because it took time to wait, and there were many private words between the besties, Yan Chen had to walk out of the house and take a breath. At this time, looking down through the window on the second floor, you can see Susan's brother Jonathan testing his ability there. Bang! At this time, the roar of flames came from a closed special hut. It was obvious that this was testing his flame temperature. Boom! Another violent flame explosion sound suddenly came. Obviously, the flame temperature has risen to a terrifying level again. 3000 Kelvin absolute temperature scale. Oh my god. Jonathan, stop growing. Lower the temperature. Looking at the temperature that was still rising, the researcher inside pressed the emergency freezing device, completely freezing the flame of Jonathan, who was still playing. At this time, a researcher in the laboratory came over and said, "Hey, brother, are you here to get some fresh air too?" Seeing that Yan Chen just nodded and seemed indifferent, he didn't care and said familiarly, "If this guy raises the temperature a little more, it will reach the level of a supernova, which is the temperature of the surface of the sun." What an enviable talent. After the researcher finished speaking, Yan Chen only replied indifferently, "Well, not bad. Not bad." And he spoke in such an indifferent tone. This guy is really good at pretending. However, the researcher hid the emotion in his heart very well, and then changed the topic. "You must be under a lot of pressure. After all, your girlfriend has superpowers. It's not that Chinese kung fu can make up for the gap. This distance is like 2 worlds, 2 races." Yan Chen listened to the inexplicably heavy tone of his second half of the sentence, and could somewhat understand the emotion behind it. However, he felt confused in his mind. What was he talking about? Just when he was about to use the muggle repelling charm to drive him away, this guy left one step ahead. The footsteps gradually faded away, but the researcher just now showed a meaningful smile, which even revealed a charm that was completely different from his gender. The strange vertical pupil in his eyes flashed away, and people could no longer detect any change. If someone noticed, they could even detect that it was a car that drove away from the Triskelion building of the SHIELD headquarters. Inside the car, a lady's voice came out slowly. "I heard that you just finished your vacation. Could it be that Tony has tormented you enough?" The Asian woman in the co-pilot seat said with a smile to the driver who was concentrating next to her. After hearing this, Agent Coulson smiled bitterly and said, "To be honest, it's not Tony's fault, May, you know my patience, but last time during an important mission, I left inexplicably." No way. Melinda, the co-pilot, was stunned for a moment. This mistake was not small, and then continued, "No way, a workaholic like you, how could you make such a mistake? But it's true, you've been under too much pressure at work recently. Maybe this is caused by your subconscious mind." Agent Coulson looked helpless and said, "Maybe. This is what Director Fury said, but I always feel that something is fishy, as if someone has cast a spell on me, as if a magical power is controlling me." Melinda didn't think much about it, she just thought he was making excuses. However, as good friends, she didn't expose him at this time, but quickly changed the subject. "So, what kind of person with special abilities will we face in this level 5 mission?" Melinda said very easily. According to past experience, this was already a big task. However, after she witnessed the birth of the Phoenix in the last level 10 mission, her vision had been raised to a higher level. No matter how strange and tricky the ability was, could it be compared to a legendary beast? Coulson smiled and said, "This mission is relatively simple, and the personnel are very friendly." Friendly. This is very rare for people with special abilities. Melinda was puzzled. She didn't know the specific mission, so she said curiously, "Don't keep me in suspense. Tell me quickly." Her voice became heavier. Coulson also knew this guy's character. Although she was a woman, her martial arts were not inferior to his own, of course, temper. So, he quickly solved the mystery and said, "You also know the recent Fantastic Four." "Is it them?" Melinda said with sudden realization. Agent Coulson smiled and said, "So you also know why it is so friendly. Although these 4 people have obtained superpowers, 2 of them are national astronauts, and the other 2 are top students of Columbia University. Among them, Zhao Helen is a world-renowned doctor, and some of her research is even related to our shield." Listening to his words, Melinda also understood why Coulson used the word, friend. After all, these are a group of scientific and technological talents with clean backgrounds and high status in society, so they don't have to worry too much that these people will suddenly affect the stability of society. And a few days ago, these 4 superpowers saved citizens on the Manhattan Bridge and won a large number of fans and reputation in society, so there is no need to worry too much about their behavior. And there is another good news, their ability is extremely strong. Coulson shook the mobile phone in his right hand. Just now, a text message was sent to his mobile phone, which was the ability test data in Helen's laboratory. Melinda couldn't help but grin and said, "It seems that our shield's actions are still so vigorous." Being able to place surveillance personnel in Helen's laboratory so quickly naturally also shows the terrifying strength of S.H.I.E.L.D. Of course, their identities and abilities have been completely revealed to the public, so necessary security protection is indispensable. That's true. Melinda nodded in agreement. In her mind alone, there were several large terrorist organizations that were very interested in these people with special abilities, so they were also at risk. But since the words were so clear, Melinda naturally knew the purpose of their action this time, which was nothing more than winning them over. After all, how could S.H.I.E.L.D. miss the opportunity to recruit such an outstanding person with special abilities? However, it seems that inviting them to become members of S.H.I.E.L.D. is not something I should do. Fortunately, you have self-knowledge. Coulson really wanted to say this, but when he thought of the consequences of being beaten for this, he said honestly, "Don't you have me?" Helen's laboratory. Zah. Susan's voice came slowly, and as soon as the voice fell, a wisp of light blue wave gushed out from her body like a wave. Helen looked at the light blue light circle that filled the whole room and couldn't help but exclaimed, "Susan, you did a great job." After hearing this, Susan also smiled, but her expression suddenly relaxed, and the spreading light blue protective shield was directly retracted and disappeared. "Very good. Your ability is not weak. You can distort and reflect the surrounding light, so you can achieve invisibility. When you are familiar with it, you can definitely use it to cover more than just yourself." This analysis also made Yan Chen nodded. Although he didn't understand the relevant scientific terms, he could still see some clues about Susan's potential through her mental power and energy trends. However, his slightly magical and metaphysical reasons must have made them confused. Susan smiled and said, "Yan Chen taught me well." Helen glanced at Yan Chen with interest, then lowered her head and looked at the experimental data for a while, but after a while she said, "Okay, there is nothing wrong with Susan's physical data and life index. At present, it seems that the radiation of cosmic rays is a gift from God. It is absolutely beneficial to us." After listening to this, Susan smiled at Yan Chen with deep agreement. In her heart, the power bestowed by the boundless universe has narrowed the gap between herself and Yan Chen. Helen took another look at the experimental data, and then said with certainty, "Everyone's body has no radiation, and there is no possibility of spreading the plague virus. I will report it to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. After all, they are exposed to cosmic radiation in space, so the necessary inspections and preventions must be properly in place. Okay, apart from coming here to check once a week, there will be no more trouble." After hearing this, Susan felt relieved. After exchanging pleasantries, she prepared to say goodbye to Yan Chen and leave. Susan hugged Helen and said, "Helen, work really needs to be separated from life." The implication of this was naturally that she should move out. After all, with her very high salary, it was enough for her to easily purchase a property in Manhattan. Helen also heard her concern. Thinking that the medical project in her hands was about to make a breakthrough, she was determined to stay, but she couldn't bear to directly reject her bestie's opinion, so she smiled and said, "Okay, I will move out as soon as possible." Susan sighed. Naturally, she knew that it was just perfunctory words, but she also knew in her heart that a girl who achieved such a high achievement at such a young age must have made some sacrifices, so she didn't push it too much. After Yan Chen and Helen nodded, they also took her slender hand and slowly walked out of the laboratory door. As soon as they came out, the air around them was cleaner and fresher. After all, the experimental instruments and materials always have some peculiar smell. After the initial worries about the physical examination disappeared, Susan was filled with joy. She held Yan Chen's arm and was very excited. But at this time, before they walked out of the door, a black car slowly drove over. When passing by the two of them, the passenger window slid down, and the face of an Asian lady was imprinted in the eyes of Yan Chen and the others. "Hello, Miss Storm." Seeing a strange woman greeting her, and an Asian, Susan couldn't help but look back and smile. "Hello. What a blonde beauty," Melinda admired in her heart. That sweet smile made Melinda feel the shock of beauty. After greeting each other, they walked towards each other. Before leaving, Yan Chen looked at them with interest. He was actually an old acquaintance of hers. Watching them gradually moving away, Melinda said uncertainly, "Don't we get off the car and ask her?" After a while, there was no sound from him. Melinda looked at him with confusion on her face and said, "Coulson." "Ah, I'm sorry, I was distracted," Coulson said apologetically. The moment he saw Yan Chen just now, he was stunned. He always felt that he had seen this young man in real life, but according to his own understanding, he seemed to have never met him except for the information. Reason and logic told him that he had not met him, but the inexplicable emotion told him that he had met Yan Chen. Did they really meet? Coulson, who was completely unaware of his deleted memories, was a little annoyed by this inexplicable emotion. This feeling of not being able to control the whole body was simply a failure for an agent. Retracting his emotions, looking at the two people walking farther and farther away in the rearview mirror, Coulson said, "There is still a chance to contact. But is that Susan's boyfriend? I think you are not quite right when you see him," Melinda said doubtfully. Naturally, he did not hide the change in his expression from her. Mentioning the young man who made him feel inexplicably confused, Coulson sighed and said, "I am not good at expressing my subjective factors, for fear of affecting your opinion. Let me show you this information first." The vehicle slowly pulled over to the side and stopped at the parking lot of the laboratory. But the two did not get out of the car directly, but sat quietly in the car. Melinda took the information in her hand and looked at it carefully. Chinese, born in an orphanage. Well, it's very monotonous and routine. The household registration and medical records are normal, and there is no public security punishment. Very ordinary, and surprisingly lucky. He quickly got together with Susan from the upper class and has been living together for several months. After reading this information, Melinda didn't see anything wrong. Coulson signaled her not to worry, and asked her to continue to look down. He has a good relationship with Tony Stark. He also has an unknown technique that looks like Chinese kung fu, which can defeat the giant lizard beast. Is this true? After reading it, Melinda was also confused. He got together with Susan for no apparent reason. And he got involved with Tony for no apparent reason. And he also had outstanding kung fu. Melinda could cover up just one of the coincidences with vague explanations such as luck and opportunity, but there were so many coincidences one after another. Could there be such a lucky coincidence in the world? But no matter what, he doesn't have a bad social record. Nor does he have the tendency to harm society, Melinda said to Coulson bluntly. Coulson smiled bitterly, knowing that she was speaking from the perspective of the Chinese race. After all, his attitude just now was suspected of hostility, so naturally he received a warning from Melinda. Melinda didn't let him down, but patted him on the shoulder and said, "Okay. I will also keep a close eye on this Chinese youth. If there is any problem with that guy, I will be the first one to not let him go." "Okay, don't waste time, we should get off the car and contact them." After saying that, the two slowly entered the laboratory. At the moment they entered, a researcher's pupils flashed a trace of surprise, but then he quickly recovered and continued to deal with the matter at hand. If Yan Chen was at the scene, he would find that this researcher happened to be the guy who had just chatted with him. Susan and Yan Chen walked hand in hand slowly on 5th Avenue in Manhattan. "This is the 18th one." Susan counted her fingers, smiling on her pretty face, and said a little aggrievedly. This number means that 18 people have greeted her on the street. Of course, this also shows that the popularity of the Fantastic Four has been thoroughly established. Among them, Susan has won a large number of fans because of her angelic face and sweet smile. So, the two of them also took the opportunity to play a game and make a bet. When the two walked from the beginning to the end of the street, if the number of people who greeted Susan was odd, she would win, and if the number of people who greeted her was even, it would be Yan Chen's victory. The condition for victory is about unlocking the postures on the couch for two people. But now they are about to reach the end of the street. But the number is exactly even, so in this way, Yan Chen is in control of the victory. Susan wrinkled her nose and said a little bit of a cheat. "No matter how you think about it, I am the one who suffers the bet." But at this time, a Land Rover car happened to be parked at the end of the street, and a man in a black suit got out of the driver's seat. Susan's eyes lit up, and the disappointment just now instantly dissipated. She said happily, I still win. But the visitor did not greet Susan, but said to Yan Chen. Hello, Mr. Yan Chen. Mr. Yan Chen. Hello. The man in a suit who got off the Land Rover said to Yan Chen in a very gentlemanly manner. Susan's smiling face suddenly collapsed. She thought that this person was the one who completely turned the balance of victory, but in the end, he didn't greet her, but greeted her boyfriend. Looking at Susan, who was pouting and unhappy. The man in the suit immediately looked embarrassed, thinking that it was his arrival that caused the young couple in front of him to have an awkward moment. Yan Chen was very happy in his heart. He nodded very rarely and said with a smile, "It's okay." What's the matter? Seeing the real owner speaking like this. Although the man in the suit had doubts in his heart, he also said, "Hello. Sir, it's like this, I am a butler from the Osborne family, you can call me Dulik." Osborne family. These words are very familiar. Yan Chen thought for a while, but he remembered the group of mercenaries from the Osborne group that he met in the New York subway last time. Thinking of this, his interested look suddenly converged back, but he just thought that there was no direct conflict between them, so considering that he helped him win the bet, he would listen to a few more words. As a butler, Druk was an expert at observing people's expressions. When he saw Yan Chen's face change, he was shocked and realized that he had said something wrong. Did the Osborne group cause him to be resistant? But he was not in a good mood. So Druk cut to the chase and said, "The scene where the gentleman defeated the lizard monster at the graduation party last time attracted the attention of our Osborne patriarch, Master Norman. So, he wants to study how you did it. Of course, this is not a free research, we will provide at least millions of dollars in return." After the call, Drucker was ready to listen to the next part with great interest. However, what he received was Yan Chen's ruthless voice, "Not interested, you can leave." Drucker's gentlemanly smile suddenly disappeared, and his face turned ugly. He didn't expect this guy to refuse without hesitation, and his words were even more rude. Did he know what the Osborne group represented? The compensation can be reconsidered, at least tens of millions of dollars. Druk thought that the offer did not interest him, so he raised the base salary by half. But in return, he received even more ruthless words. "Get lost." Yan Chen smiled and said directly. "You." Drucker could no longer maintain the respectful look on his face, his entire face flushed red like goose liver. The Osborne Group's stock market valuation is hundreds of billions of dollars, and the Osborne family is the founder and major shareholder. As the steward of the Osborne family, Drucker is also a master and a servant. Moreover, you have to look at the owner before beating the dog. Is this guy so arrogant? Doesn't he take the Osborne Group seriously? Thinking of this, Drucker's hypocritical attitude just now disappeared, and he said angrily, "Very good. You are the first person who dares to anger us. Although I don't know why you are dissatisfied, sir, our Osborne family will not only repay debts but also avenge our enemies. I will remember today's revenge in my heart. See you later." After saying this, he took a last deep look at Yan Chen, as if he wanted to remember his face thoroughly, and then got into the car and left without looking back. Yan Chen said nothing, but what no one knew was that the shadow under him was shaking inexplicably. But this change was only fleeting, so it did not attract the attention of others. Wait until the black Land Rover completely disappeared at the entrance of the street. Susan then hugged Yan Chen's arm tightly, and said a little pettily, "This person is so hypocritical. He looked respectful just now, but his true nature was exposed after a few words. However, the Osborne family usually acts in a domineering manner, so you have to be careful. They seem to have taken a fancy to something about you." Yan Chen patted her head, signaling her to be at ease. "It's okay. There's no need to worry about just a few minions." "Okay." Susan smiled sweetly. She was very clear about her man's ability. Comparing them to minions instead of ants was very polite. However, when she thought of the Osborne group, Susan couldn't help but talk about the rumors she heard from the upper class. It is said that the current Osborne group is not as glorious as before. But the reason is very strange. It is rumored that Chairman Norman is a stubborn person and keeps pouring money into scientific research projects such as human genes. However, the secret of this genetic mutation is not so easy to be solved with money, so it is like a bottomless pit that keeps draining away funds. Even the weapons and chemical industries that used to make money are dragged down by this project. Therefore, the Osborne group is a bit precarious now. After coming to this world, Yan Chen has been staying at home. This is the first time he has heard the secrets of these big companies. After hearing Susan's words at this time, Yan Chen confirmed his thoughts. He thought that the skills he showed at the graduation ceremony had already caught the eyes of many people. And this Osborne group wants to study some secrets from his body. So at that time, when Yan Chen heard about Duluc's intention, he already knew their general idea. Thinking of the Osborne family's subordinates, there are also a group of brutal mercenaries, and they know that they are not law-abiding people. What a pity. The unknown human enhancement potion in his hand will definitely make the Osborne group crazy. What a pity is that no matter what the price is, Yan Chen will not let them get involved. Of course, what is even more regrettable is that those who dare to threaten him are all on the road to the underworld. Do you still dare to say that today's revenge will be repaid later? In my case, today's revenge will be settled today. Yan Chen made a conclusion for him in his heart, and then silently said in his heart, Arya, do it. Duluc was holding the steering wheel with one hand and communicating on the phone with the other hand. He said, I'm sorry, that guy is not interested in our conditions at all. Of course, I could sense a sense of malice from his expression and words. I don't know what grudge the Osborne group has against him. After hearing what he said, the person on the other end of the call pondered and said, since you don't want to drink the toast, then let's follow the old rules. By the way, don't kill him for me. Oh, the good news is that his girlfriend Susan is a member of the Fantastic Four. Of course, isn't this a good thing that comes in pairs? The voice on the other end couldn't even suppress his excitement. After hanging up the phone, hearing his master's affirmative answer, Duluc completely revealed a cruel smile. I'm going to kill you. See how crazy you are. But at this time, Duluc, who had just come back to his senses from the phone, suddenly saw a figure behind him in the rearview mirror. This is a charming and beautiful woman sat quietly in her seat. Quote, too beautiful. Druck only took a quick glance and felt a breathtaking beauty from the gorgeous face. How did this woman get here? Thinking of this, a chill suddenly rose from his spine, and Duluc's forehead was even covered with a trace of cold sweat. Before he could finish his words, he realized that his right foot had stepped on the accelerator without his control. The whole Land Rover suddenly broke through at a high speed, speeding down the road. No, looking at the scene outside the window, the two sides were retreating rapidly. Duluc cried out in surprise and tried to move his right leg completely away. But he found that he couldn't move at all. The black shadows were like black hands reaching out from the abyss, completely nailing his right leg to the accelerator. You are, what monster? Arya's icy face showed no emotion. She just said in her unique voice, my master has a message for you. Today's revenge must be settled today. I will send you off now. Owner. Duluc couldn't help but have a doubt in his mind, but he soon knew who it was from her words. It was the young man just now. Yan Chen. This guy also has such a terrifying and weird subordinate. Ah! A cry of surprise suddenly came from his mouth. Before he could think carefully, the entire black Land Rover reached the maximum speed and crashed into the wall in front of him. Bang! A violent bang suddenly came. The entire vehicle, which was more than several meters long, was instantly dented by the huge collision. Then Arya, who suddenly appeared in the driver's seat, also left quietly before that. Just now, two lobbyists came to persuade Yan Chen, while Coulson and Melinda persuaded the Fantastic Four. Of course, the members of S.H.I.E.L.D. who also came to act as lobbyists also encountered some setbacks. It's just that they did not pay the price of their lives for it. Sitting on a chair outside the door of the laboratory, Melinda was eating half a hamburger in her hand. In order to rush here from the headquarters in Washington, she had not eaten breakfast for a day, but she did not expect to get a satisfactory answer. Thinking of this, she took a big bite of the hamburger with dissatisfaction. On the contrary, Coulson was very patient. After taking a sip of Coke, he looked at Melinda, who was unhappy next to him, and said, May, don't be unhappy. After all, attracting people to join S.H.I.E.L.D. is a patient task. So you're saying that I'm not patient enough? I have a bad temper. Looking at Melinda's smiling face, Coulson felt that it was a malicious smile and couldn't help but say, no. Of course not. In order to completely change the subject, Coulson said, but at first I didn't expect this result. Helen is determined to pursue scientific research, and the Stone Man is determined to turn back into his original human form. It seems that only Jonathan the Human Torch has not made a clear statement. Melinda sneered and said, although the Human Torch is very powerful, if you really recruit him, I think S.H.I.E.L.D. will have to bear a lot of blame. After listening, Coulson sighed. What May said makes sense. Although Jonathan is extremely smart, he is also a problem youth who likes to show off. As a national astronaut, he has been punished by NASA for taking 2 Victoria's Secret models to mess around in the space simulation room. If he is recruited into S.H.I.E.L.D., with his show-off personality, it will definitely bring a lot of trouble to everyone. Let's take another look. Coulson also felt helpless. The only person who was a little interested in him might be a big trouble. Then only Susan is left. Melinda said, she has no physical defects, no strong ambition in the outside world, and is not a troublesome girl. Her background and resume are perfect. She is a good candidate for a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. What's more, if we recruit her, maybe she can discipline her brother. Melinda added. That's true. Coulson nodded in agreement. However, in this case, there is no way to get around the hurdle of Yan Chen. It seems that the two sides still have to meet again. At this time, on the way to leave, after Melinda finished the hamburger in her hand, she looked at Coulson with bright eyes and said, since you called me here, there must be some threats this time. Have you discovered? After listening, Coulson looked very cautious and said, for now, there are none, but I will let the security personnel inside strengthen the defense. After that, he looked at the information on the mobile phone in his hand and said, the gangs in New York still have some things that we need to deal with. Since there is no progress in winning over, let's go there first, and then come back to discuss it in detail. Since the collapse of Jin Bing's underworld empire, the dark ecology behind the scenes in New York has been in chaos. This has also made their work a lot busier. Just as their car slowly left the street entrance, a researcher in the laboratory witnessed this scene from the window. It is still the same laboratory attached to Columbia University Medical School. Helen exhaled lightly, stood in front of the kitchen table, and drank a cup of coffee quietly. Although this is her laboratory, it is the living area on the 3rd floor. Since she took off the white coat, her every move has been very relaxed, and her every frown is full of femininity, and the oriental charm on her face is even stronger. Moreover, since her genes have been mutated by cosmic rays, Helen feels that her body, which should have been delicate, has become more and more energetic. However, although she has become a superpower owner and a superpower who can manipulate energy, but Helen still has no intention of being a superhero, and she doesn't pay too much attention to the name of Fantastic Four, so after the visit of S.H.I.E.L.D. today, she insisted on rejecting their solicitation. At that time, Coulson said, your superpowers can help many people and fight many super criminals. But Helen refused very confidently, no, my most powerful ability is not a superpower at all, but my scientific knowledge. Moreover, my scientific knowledge can help more people. Helen couldn't help laughing when she recalled her words. Of course, it was true. Even if she joined S.H.I.E.L.D., acted as a superhero, and used her superpowers to fight criminals, it would be a bit of a waste of talent. But the regeneration cradle technology she is still developing is different. As long as it is successfully born, even the most basic scarless wound healing is enough to benefit the human beings of the whole world. Then, the gene repair and even the elimination of viruses in the body that will continue to be developed is an important technology that will benefit the entire future. So, simply saving people is not worth mentioning in her eyes. But what she has in her heart is the bigger earth. However, few people can understand this idea. After all, everyone attaches great importance to the superpowers in Helen's body. And people outside the laboratory think so too. Dong. Suddenly, there was a sound of fine noises coming from the floor below. Helen came back to her senses, frowned slightly, and looked a little alert, but she was puzzled by the noises from the floor below. Since her transformation with superpowers, her 5 senses have been improved. Before she could continue to hear the noises below. Click. That was the key drilling the hole, making a fine and crisp sound. That was the door to her living area. Hearing this sound, Helen panicked for no reason, and her face became tense. She couldn't help but take out a sharp knife from the kitchen, and then ran to the back door. After all, every laboratory, for safety, is required to have 2 doors in front and back. But at this time, click, there was another sound, and the heavy back door made a crisp sound, and then slowly opened, and a figure slowly came into her sight. Ah! Helen couldn't help but let out a scream. The front and back doors of the entire living area were all opened by unknown outsiders. You are not. Looking at this familiar face and the lab clothes on his body, isn't this his subordinate in the lab? But at this time, the person who came in from the front door suddenly pulled out a pistol from his waist and pointed it at this side. No. Bang bang. The sound of vibrating gunfire continued to be heard. No. Helen's pupils shrank inexplicably, and just as a wave of energy in her body was about to burst out, the trajectory of the bullet was to hit the personnel behind her. Bang! The bullets kept hitting the back wall, splashing wisps of dust. It was the personnel who came in from the back door, who successfully dodged the flying bullets with a difficult posture. Seeing this scene, the man who fired the gun gritted his teeth and said, "Drive, Helen, I am sent by S.H.I.E.L.D. to protect you, follow me quickly." As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying sound suddenly came. His waist and abdomen were pierced by a ferocious giant claw, and a pool of terrifying blood immediately splashed on the ground in front of him. Before he finished speaking, the blond man who attacked from behind raised his right hand with great force and threw the whole body towards the kitchen where Helen was. Bang! The whole body collided with the wall, making a loud noise. The terrifying force not only broke the pipes laid on the wall, but also completely smashed a big hole in the thick wall. Well, Helen covered her lips with her hands, trying to suppress her screams of fear. But when she looked at the corpse with its eyes open, a chill of terror filled her heart, and her body trembled uncontrollably. But when she felt the energy surging in her body, she felt a little relieved. After a while, she leaned against the corner of the kitchen, looked at the enemy in front of her with a little calmness and said, "You are not my lab technician. What do you want to do?" Although the face was exactly the same, the temperament was different. After hearing Helen's words, the lab technician suddenly laughed. Ha ha ha. The laughter echoed, but it was full of irony. Before Helen finished speaking, her expression suddenly changed. The laughter that came into her ears turned into a woman's. How is it possible? This is not a man. At this time, the surface of his body moved, and he turned into a woman with blue skin and fine scales. Mystique smiled and said, "It is obvious that your researcher has died long ago." Mutant. Helen saw the body-changing scene and couldn't help but blurt out. The fierce saber-toothed tiger was staring at her, while Mystique slowly walked over and said to her with a smile, "We are here to ask you to join our mutant brotherhood. Your superpowers are destined to be different from humans. We are from 2 different worlds, so join us. Brotherhood of Mutants. Isn't this a terrorist organization? What a joke, why would I join it? You got the wrong person, I'm not a mutant." The saber-toothed tiger said in a gruff voice, "You have abilities, aren't you a mutant?" Helen shook her head and said, "Mutants' abilities are due to the expression of X genes, but my genetic structure is fundamentally different. I'm different from you." Mystique frowned slightly. She was used to being discriminated against, and she felt inexplicably irritated when she heard these remarks. Of course, Magneto seemed to covet her very much, as if he was going to use her for some plan. "It doesn't matter, you will have a different understanding soon." As soon as she finished speaking, Mystique's steps could not help but get closer. P.S. A week of streaking requires diligence. The sound of footsteps continued to ring on the ground. The heavy sound of muffled blows seemed to hit Helen's heart. Calm down. Helen took a deep breath and looked at the figure who kept coming. She kept telling herself in her heart that she was already a superpower, not the little girl who could only do fancy moves before. At this time, a trace of unusual stench hit her nose. Following the faint smell in the air, Helen's sight could not help but look at the wall. There happened to be a broken small pipe opening on the damaged wall. Hissing. At the mouth of the pipe that was broken by the heavy blow just now, there were continuous and dense sounds. Natural gas pipeline. Ta-ta. Mystique gradually walked into the kitchen, her eyes looking at a frightened pet. She smiled and said, "I don't care about any scientific methods. Anyway, if you have the ability, you have to join the Brotherhood." As soon as she finished speaking, her body could not help but speed up her pace. But the strange smell in the air was immediately noticed by Mystique. This is... What's the smell? Never mind, Helen said with a smile. You don't understand science, and I don't blame you, but you should know common sense. Natural gas plus flame should be known to happen. As soon as the voice fell, Helen took a deep breath, threw herself on the gas stove, and turned on the ignition button with her right hand. No, Mystique couldn't help but let out a cry of surprise. On the other side, the saber-toothed tiger rushed forward like a sharp arrow, leaving a trail of afterimages. But in the end, it was too late to stop Helen's move. Bang! The bright flame on the gas stove just lit up, and then it reacted violently with the natural gas leaking in the air. The whole air was instantly ignited, and then... Boom! With a horrible loud noise, the kitchen area suddenly exploded. Ah! The saber-toothed tiger roared, and the figure that flew forward blocked Mystique. But how could he block such a terrifying shock wave? Not only did it instantly twist and melt the surrounding building walls, but it also knocked the two figures out. Boom! The glass of the windows on the third floor was instantly shattered, and all the crisp objects inside were destroyed. The entire originally bright white decoration environment suddenly fell into a dead silence like black charcoal, with only small flames scattered everywhere to embellish it. After a long time, the air was still filled with gray smoke. Cough, cough, cough. A crisp cough suddenly came from the fallen figure. Helen actually survived under this terrifying flame, landing on the ground, and then her whole delicate body slowly stood on the ground. The energy that was constantly fluctuating on the surface of her body like waves just now gradually converged and sank into the body, leaving only a trace of ripples in the palm of her hand. It worked. Helen showed her joy. In the critical situation just now, she still used all her power. At that moment, the blast wave that was gushing towards her was swallowed into her body by the waves that emerged on the surface of her body. And more importantly, with this piece of clothing protecting her, her damage was reduced to the lowest point. Helen looked at the dark blue fiber tights underneath her and couldn't help showing her joy. This spacesuit, which was also soaked in cosmic rays, showed super fireproof ability. Energy absorption, coupled with this space tights. It perfectly allowed her to survive. However, we can't stay here any longer. Helen covered her nose and was about to leave. But at this moment, a thin sound suddenly came. Pain. A sturdy figure slowly stood up. Helen was stunned. The large area of ulcers and burns on his body were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Some of the serious wounds had even formed blood scabs. This, self-healing. Helen gritted her teeth and looked at this horrible scene. The joy she had just felt after surviving the disaster suddenly disappeared. Run. The thought came to her mind. Without saying a word, Helen rushed out of the back door on the third floor. Stop right there, you idiot! A terrifying roar suddenly resounded throughout the corridor of the fire exit. Ta ta ta! Heavy footsteps were heard from far away. Run! Tears welled up in Helen's eyes. What happened to her last night reminded her of the moment when she was on the verge of death at the graduation ceremony. But at this time, there was no one to save her. Only herself. The footsteps were getting closer and closer, as if they were a death warrant to scare herself. Helen had just arrived at the stairs on the second floor, but the saber-toothed tiger, which was far behind just now, was gradually approaching with its physical advantage. In a few seconds, the two people would definitely meet at one place, and at that time, it would be a dead end. 5 seconds, 3 seconds, 1 second, Helen counted down silently in her heart. As footsteps came from behind, she suddenly took a deep breath, then suddenly turned her body, spread her hands and faced outward. Go to hell! A wave of ripples suddenly spread out from the palm of his hand. With a loud bang, a terrifying energy shock wave gushed out directly, hitting the saber-toothed tiger that had just appeared at the entrance of the corridor accurately. Boom! The saber-toothed tiger, who had not had time to block it, could only let out a wail, and then was knocked down by the terrifying force and hit the wall behind. Bang! As the gray smoke rose, the whole person was perfectly embedded in the wall. Ha! Helen sighed, and most of the energy she had just absorbed was instantly released. After calming down her breath, she continued to walk down without hesitation. Bang! She pushed open the door of the fire escape, but found several bodies lying on the ground. Well, Helen covered her mouth and looked at their tragic deaths, trying not to scream, and then continued to run towards the parking lot next to the corridor. That guy must not be dead. Go. Buzz. The engine sounded, and her car was finally not tampered with. The car sped away. Helen in the driver's seat kept calming her breathing, but her delicate face was already full of tears. All the security personnel of S.H.I.E.L.D. died. It can be said that ordinary police force could not do anything to the monster just now. And when she thought that her researchers were deceived by a woman, she couldn't trust anyone. She didn't even dare to ask for help from anyone on the roadside. But at this time, a figure emerged in her mind. Helen, who had left aimlessly, immediately went to a place in the night. Mercedes-Benz car slowly drove into a wealthy neighborhood in Manhattan. According to the past, Helen has been here many times. Yes, this is the duplex apartment of Yan Chen and Susan. Somehow, perhaps she thought of the majestic figure who suddenly stood in front of her like a god and completely contained the danger at the graduation banquet. As if by some strange coincidence, Helen came to the door of the apartment. Helen took a deep breath, then slowly got out of the car with her slender figure and walked towards the door of the apartment. She raised her slender and smooth fingers and knocked on the door gently. On the second floor of the duplex apartment, Yan Chen and Susan were entangled in the bedroom with great enthusiasm. It was already late at night, so the noise had been going on for quite some time, but listening to the constant collision sounds and the faint moans, there was no sign of calming down. But at this time, dong dong, a gentle knock on the door came slowly from downstairs. Yan Chen did not pay much attention to it, but hugged Susan, who was covered in sweat, in his arms, and savored the aftertaste of it. Dong. Another more urgent knock on the door came from downstairs. This time, even Susan noticed the movement below, and she turned over and arched her head in Yan Chen's arms. I don't know who it is, why don't you go and take a look? An inaudible and tender voice came. Yan Chen just nodded, but the phoenix divine thought spread directly from his mind, and the woman outside the door on the lower floor was also imprinted in his mind. Helen, how could it be her? It's Helen, Yan Chen said directly. Susan instantly came to her senses from the immersive aftertaste. Why did Helen come here at this time? I'll go and have a look. Yan Chen breathed a sigh of relief and walked down from the couch slowly. A white bathrobe on the ground moved without wind and suddenly fell into his palm. During the process of dressing, Yan Chen's figure kept flashing. Whoosh! After a fine sound, Yan Chen had come to the entrance, and the sturdy body that was naked just now was now covered with a white bathrobe, with a strip of cloth tied around the waist and abdomen. After opening the door, Helen's figure came into Yan Chen's eyes. As always, she had a plump and tight figure, but on that delicate and pretty face, there was no oriental charm, but it was filled with panic. The moment she saw Yan Chen, tears suddenly slid down her pretty face like a dam collapsing. Yan Chen. After a scream, Helen, who had survived the disaster, jumped up and immediately threw herself into Yan Chen's arms. Yan Chen didn't know what happened, but she knew she was frightened when she felt the body in her arms trembling like a frightened little animal. This kind of intimidation was even stronger than the lizard monster that attacked at the graduation party. Okay, everything is fine. Yan Chen tried to comfort her with the most gentle words, and his hands kept patting her back gently, letting her tense body slowly relax. After a long time, Helen finally relaxed, her face flushed with shyness, and she slowly broke free from Yan Chen's arms. Come in and talk. Yan Chen looked at her delicate little face, which was like a cat, covered with black stains, tears and redness, and couldn't help feeling distressed. Then he pulled her arm and slowly walked into the room. The moment she entered the door, an invisible magical wave swept through her body. Well, no, something seems to be going on at home. I think I should go, Helen said anxiously, but she walked out. Muggle repelling spell. Yan Chen slapped his forehead, he actually forgot about this. This is an autonomous defense barrier cast on the duplex apartment. In order to let Muggles enter the door, they need to have a specific magic mark on their body like a key. So after putting the magic mark on Helen, Yan Chen pulled her into the door. In the living room, wisps of white smoke slowly rose from the teacup on the table. Helen sighed, then took the teacup with her right hand and took a sip. In other words, you were attacked by mutants for no apparent reason. Susan sat next to Helen on the sofa, holding her left hand tightly with her slender and smooth hands, and her angelic face was full of worry. Just now, Helen told the story of what happened, and the thrilling part of it shocked Susan. That's right, I don't know why they came to me. Helen's face calmed down and she shook her head calmly. A treasure in the hand is a crime. This thought flashed through Yan Chen's mind. He was just showing off his skills and techniques, but the Osborne family was thinking about him. So there was no need to think too much. Helen was found because of her ability. Energy absorption and release. Even with her shallow understanding of the superpowers in this world, she knew that this ability was enough to let her stand at the forefront, and the potential in it was infinite. Mutants. What are these? Yan Chen leaned against the wall, looking puzzled. Susan knew that he didn't quite understand this world, so she patiently explained, they are some races with various abilities. Although they are gifted, they are discriminated against a lot in society. Among them, the one who attacked Helen was one of the terrorist organizations, the Brotherhood of Mutants. I see. Yan Chen nodded, and he felt that this race was not rare. After all, in his original world, there were many races such as fairies, centaurs, and giants. When Susan mentioned this terrorist organization, her face changed. Jonathan. Susan suddenly reacted, and then anxiously dialed the phone number, thinking that Helen had been attacked, then her brother, they shouldn't. Fortunately, after some communication, both of them had no problems. Looking at Helen, who was still in shock, Susan sighed, then held Helen's hand and said, since your home in the laboratory is gone. And it's not safe to live outside, so why not stay here for a while? Hearing the invitation to live together, Helen naturally refused. After all, living in a couple's home was a bit embarrassing, but there was always a little expectation in my heart. Of course, Susan was very tough and pulled her down. Moreover, without a place to stay and in a very dangerous situation outside, Helen was half-hearted and stayed. Of course, Yan Chen also had a little joy in his heart. After all, there was a new beautiful girl under the eaves, and maybe there would be a wonderful development. But I didn't expect. Tonight, please go to bed alone. Susan showed a playful smile. Her clear eyes were cunning, and she patted Yan Chen's hand like a successful fox. You are going to suffocate me to death. Yan Chen sighed. This little girl is definitely taking revenge on him. She completely lost the bet during the day, so she was at his mercy on the couch just now. She tried all the extremely shy and embarrassing postures in the past. At this time, Helen, who had washed up, came out of the bathroom. Her slender and smooth hands held her black hair. Her head tilted slightly to one side, and she kept wiping the sweat stains on her hair with a towel. The white bathrobe she wore could not hide her slender figure underneath. Especially after bathing, the small piece of delicate collarbone exposed outside exuded a crystal-clear whiteness, as if it were the finest white jade. What happened? What were you talking about just now that made you so happy? Helen said with a smile. Susan's face was a little ruddy. How could she say that thing between them? Then she waved to Yan Chen and took Helen back to the guest room. Yan Chen was left alone in the large master bedroom. Perhaps there is also an Arya lurking in the shadows. The night passed peacefully. Yan Chen was floating on the couch in the bedroom, exuding a slight scorching breath. And just now, he was practicing slowly according to the magic book, Hachi Maiwen manuscript, which records how to use the energy of celestial bodies and stars. In a sense, Susan and the others can be regarded as the transformation of them by cosmic energy. However, due to the uncertainty of gene mutation, this kind of transformation is simply not possible to replicate. But this does not hinder the possibility of Yan Chen using the power of the stars. A gorgeous magic circle suddenly burst out from the right hand, and a faint phantom of a golden bull emerged on the right side of the body. The left hand was also unambiguous, and it was constantly changing. As the spell was silently recited in his heart, a golden phantom drawing a bow and shooting an arrow actually emerged from the air on the left side of the body. Ha! Yan Chen breathed a sigh of relief. It's done. This is the embodiment of celestial energy. And this energy happens to be Taurus and Sagittarius of the zodiac. These two energies can be slightly refined and used according to the corresponding methods to amplify violent power, and the other side can shoot out more powerful and terrifying long-range damage. Compared with the ordinary energy that exists in the world, it is obvious that this celestial energy is a complete victory over the energy of the outside world, not only in terms of quality concentration but also in terms of ability diversity. However, this also broadened Yan Chen's horizons. After all, although the celestial energy is of high quality, it is still far inferior to the power of the ancient gods. And the top magic in this world basically needs to use the power of the ancient gods. Take the peak of white magic, for example. It is necessary to utilize the energy of the three demons of Vishanti, and the peak power of black magic also requires the energy of the ancient god Sithan. Even the supreme sorcerer Ancient One, in order to completely break free from the shackles of mankind, needs to steal the power of Dormammu so as to prolong his life for hundreds of years to this day. So it can be confirmed. To go further, especially the power of the ancient gods, Yan Chen must also comprehend it. And in the library of Kamaji Mahal, there happens to be a Book of Vishanti, which not only records how to borrow the power of the Vishanti Trinity, but also includes almost all the white magic in the universe. The use of water elements, the use of celestial star energy, and summoning spells, Yan Chen has already thoroughly understood. Next, it is to advance to a higher level and work hard. Disperse, Yan Chen said softly. Then the energy around his body suddenly turned into a slightly chaotic wind, blowing around the room. At this time, dong, after a fine knock on the door slowly opened. At the moment the door opened, Yan Chen slowly sat down on the couch from the floating state. At the same time, a beautiful and slender figure also appeared in Yan Chen's eyes. You are. Helen looked at the gestures made by Yan Chen with great interest, and said curiously. After all, some magic spells not only require chanting, but also sometimes require the guidance of gestures, so it is somewhat confusing to outsiders. Yan Chen put his fingers together and said slowly, meditation, a method of using magic. Really, there was a hint of surprise in Helen's eyes, but it disappeared quickly. Although she heard the seemingly unreliable words from his mouth, her heart had already told herself that this was the correct answer. After all, since she met him, it started from the time when he gave her the palliative. Her understanding of him was limited to the fact that his whole body was like a hazy mist, as if it was filled with magic, making it impossible to see clearly. That's right, it's magic, right? Helen, who has believed in science for more than 20 years and has never worshipped religion, smiled and said, then can I learn it too? Unfortunately, Yan Chen smiled and shook her head. After all, she was personally verified to be a muggle last night. You don't have that kind of talent. Hearing his blunt words, Helen couldn't help but feel a terrible sense of loss. But, don't be sad, your ability is enough to benefit you for life. Yan Chen added. But tonight, he planned to let them take human enhancement drugs. Compared with Susan, whose ability is more reflected in mental power, Helen's ability to absorb and release energy may become much stronger due to the change in physique. At this time, Susan's voice shouting for dinner came from the living room downstairs. Coo, coo, coo. Owl Kelly was eating feed on the dining table in the living room. Her sharp eyes looked at the person who suddenly appeared on the table from time to time. Looking at Helen's curious gaze, Kelly spread her snow-white wings to protect the plate, and then buried her whole head directly in the food. When Yan Chen saw this, he couldn't help but smile and said, please, no one will snatch food from you. Helen also smiled. She didn't expect that even a small pet could be so human. This family is really interesting. Even though she has lived there for less than a day, she saw that there was a door leading to the basement on the first floor. And the second floor even has stairs leading to the upper floors. This weird architectural layout even made her feel incredible. This is obviously just a two-story duplex apartment. Where does the basement and floors above the third floor come from? And from the outside, there is no change at all. It's amazing. Is this magic? Helen looked at Yan Chen, and a hint of curiosity flashed in her eyes. It is said that tonight she will even cleanse the bodies of the two of them and take them to a new level. Just the efficacy, isn't it similar to the super serum that appeared during World War II? He can actually make such a magic potion. Maybe you need this. At this time, a plain word came from her ear. Helen was stunned, and then looked at the small bottle of medicine handed over from his right hand. She was very familiar with it. Isn't this the palliative given last time? As long as she took it gently, she could recall the happy things in the past and dispel the shadows in her heart. But, Recalling the godlike figure at the graduation ceremony dinner, Helen's delicate and smooth face was filled with a brilliant smile. She looked at Yan Chen and said, "With you by my side, I don't need it anymore." Then she handed the potion back to him. However, Yan Chen was slightly stunned. How could these words sound like? It was like a love confession. Helen seemed to realize something, and her face flushed. She lowered her head and said nothing. The scene suddenly became quiet. The two of them were silent. The only sound was the sound of Susan cooking in the kitchen and the sound of the news on TV. Latest developments. The giant lizard is suspected to be a man-made creation of the Osborne group, and the Osborne group has not yet given a response. Hearing the voice coming, Yan Chen couldn't help but look at the TV. But soon this article was completely turned over. Recent economic hot events. Fengdu Group's IPO plan was completely blocked. After the stock price plummeted, all shareholders recently announced that they would withdraw their shares and withdraw their capital. The group is on the verge of bankruptcy. What is thought-provoking is that Dong was assassinated in the parking lot, and the group's chairman, Victor Doom, has been missing ever since. What? Helen turned back from the dining table and was a little shocked when she heard the news on TV. Susan was holding her meal at this time and saw the news on TV. After a while, she said, "I didn't expect Doom to end up like this. I also have some responsibility for that." Helen sighed and said. After all, the Fengdu Group invested a large sum of money to fund them to go to space for a once-in-a-century genetic research experiment, but they did not expect that a cosmic storm that arrived early would destroy the experiment. Of course, it also made them the Fantastic Four. But the biggest victim among them may be Doom. However, Susan did not think so. She comforted the slightly ashamed Helen and said, "Doom made such a large investment, of course he saw the profit return, but doing business naturally has risks. Moreover, you have discussed the data risks with him. Moreover, this guy chose to hide in the shield of the space station alone when the crisis came. It was extremely shameless." After being comforted like this, the guilt on Helen's face was slightly relieved. Thinking that she would have to explain the matter of last night to the people of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the afternoon, Helen did not think much about it and continued to eat the food on the table. Also in New York, in a closed underground pipeline, bang! A thunderous sound burst out. Ah! Accompanied by the sound of bones breaking, there was a heart-wrenching sound. "That's all. I thought he was so strong with this kind of stuff. Those superheroes are really useless." A cold and hoarse voice suddenly came. Doom, wearing a black windbreaker, outlined a cruel and ferocious look. He raised his right foot slightly, and then there was another short whistling sound. Crack! The remaining hind leg was also completely shattered in the same way. Ah! Looking at the poor lizard beast howling under his feet, Doom had no mercy at all, and he waved his right hand slightly to the electronic device next to him. The instrument laid underground suddenly burst out with dazzling blue electric currents, which continued to flow into the palm of Doom's right hand. Zilla zilla! The terrifying sound of electric currents continued to gather from the palm of his hand, and then Doom's palm suddenly fell down. Boom! Under the whip of the electric current that was like a blue snake, the whole body of the giant lizard was shaking and trembling, and there was a terrifying and hot blood hole in the waist and abdomen that was hit directly just now. The lizard beast that had been wailing just now could no longer utter a word, and its huge body fell to the ground, spitting blood foam. Snort! It's so weak! Doom exclaimed. When he first saw it at the graduation party, he thought this giant lizard with a visual impact was very strong. So much so that he once thought that Yan Chen, who defeated the lizard, was so skilled. It turned out that these were just illusions. Dumb sighed, this giant lizard is just like this. After the flesh and blood on his body transformed into a metal structure, he was invulnerable to swords and guns. His punches and kicks set off the sound of wind and thunder, and just a light step could break people's bones. Not only that, he had the ability to control terrifying electric currents in his body, and he beat the lizard so hard that it had no power to fight back. After defeating the giant lizard effortlessly, it also made Dum realize how powerful his own superpowers are, and Yan Chen's so-called kung fu is not impressive at all. Similarly, I can kill him like slaughtering a dog, just like I can easily kill the major shareholder. Of course, it also let Susan, the little fool, experience the pain of losing her husband. This is the office of S.H.I.E.L.D. in New York. Although it is not as big as the Triskelion building in Washington, D.C., it is not much inferior. Yan Chen and his party just happened to come here today. Helen, who has a slender figure, sat on the soft red sofa and was reporting to the SHIELD members about what happened last night. The attack of mutants. Not only did it hurt Helen herself, it also cost them several elite members of SHIELD. Agent Coulson sighed and said, "We also understand the specific situation, but we don't quite understand the reason for the attack by the Brotherhood of Mutants this time. But recently there was also a terrorist incident related to the Brotherhood, that is the disappearance of Congressman Kelly." Senator Kelly. Susan, who was standing beside him, asked with a little confusion. Coulson explained very patiently, "This is a senator who strongly opposes mutants and is also trying hard to encourage the government to control mutants and formulate a mutant registration bill. With such political demands, it is no wonder that he was caught by the terrorist organization of the Brotherhood of Mutants." But Helen didn't mess with these mutants. How could they do such a thing? Susan said angrily, thinking of what happened to her last night. She felt inexplicably angry in her heart. "This is also what we find strange," Coulson said a little helplessly. "After all, Dr. Helen has never made any discriminatory remarks against mutants. How could she attract these Brotherhood members? And the argument of absorbing her into the Brotherhood is too untenable. Is there any conspiracy behind this? So that Helen's scientific knowledge is needed? Or her energy manipulation ability?" Coulson came back to his senses and said to Helen, "We will also report this matter to the X-Force. Of course, I am sorry again for what happened to you. It was our negligence." "Not really." Helen shook her hand, and then said, "Speaking of which, I should also feel sorry for the agents who died that night." At this time, the scenery outside the window was approaching evening. After explaining some things again, everyone planned to go back to eat. Before leaving, Coulson tentatively said again, "Drive Helen, maybe you should consider our invitation. After all, you should have realized how powerful your abilities are last night." Without waiting for Helen to reply, Susan showed a sweet smile and refused. "Okay. Helen is not feeling well, let's talk later." As soon as she finished speaking, her pretty and lively body turned around, the pair of slender arms led Helen away. After all, in Susan's view, what else could be better than her own home? What's more, last night, those SHIELD security personnel had no chance to fight back in front of the mutants. How could she feel at ease? Yan Chen, who was leaning against the wall, seemed to be accompanying his girlfriend shopping. He kept silent and watched everyone leave. Only then did his expression reveal a slight change. Melinda watched the tall and slender figure gradually leave. She turned around and said to Coulson, "I have to say, the temperament exuded by this young man is rare. If I were 10 years younger, I might be moved. So it's not surprising that Susan is doing well with him. But don't you have a lot of questions to ask him? How did he get together with Susan? How did he get along with Tony? How did he possess all the power?" Although these coincidences are intriguing, they do not constitute a threat to social order, nor do they constitute conditions for questioning. Moreover, noticing Susan's resistance, Coulson did not say a word. He sighed and said, "Maybe it's just a coincidence. In any case, let's leave him alone for now. Congressman Kelly's disappearance must be related to their search for Dr. Helen this time. The Brotherhood of Mutants' actions are a bit urgent, we have to follow closely. Also, we need the help of ex-police." Whoosh. The Mercedes-Benz car slowly drove at high speed on the streets of New York. The surrounding scenes kept receding rapidly from both sides of the window. The lights were just coming on, and there were bright red street lights on both sides of the street, so you can see that the street lights are connected together, like a long red dragon. Yan Chen supported his chin with his hand and stared at the scene outside. With his keen perception, he was naturally able to detect the sight that Agent Coulson had just cast. But it was not surprising. After all, this was a well-trained agent. Even if he was brainwashed and his memory was deleted, when he saw himself, there would be some inexplicable feelings in his heart. Ordinary people might ignore it. But Coulson is an elite agent who acts rigorously, so even if there are some clues, he will continue to investigate them in his heart. Of course, Yan Chen didn't care. After all, although SHIELD is one of the most violent agencies in the world, it is still not enough in front of his increasingly perfect magic ability. As long as they don't provoke me, it would be best if we can live in peace. But the consequences of angering me. I guess Mr. Drucker, the butler of the Osborne group last time, has a lot to say. Of course, he can only say it in hell. Coo coo coo. At this time, a crisp owl call sounded. Yan Chen came back to his senses in an instant. Isn't this the call of Kelly, the owl messenger? But listening to the slightly spiritual electronic sound, he knew it was just the sound of recording. I recorded the ringtone. Susan shook the phone in her hand. You dote on her too much. Yan Chen was speechless. Relying on the mistress's preference, the owl messenger's food became better and better. Her whole body almost became fat as a ball, and the task of helping her find the Horcrux was slowed down a lot. It seems that I should reduce her food when I go back, otherwise she won't be able to fly. On the other side, Susan looked at Yan Chen's helpless expression, smiled, then answered the phone and said, Jonathan. Why are you calling at this time? You don't want to ask me for living expenses, do you? Before she finished speaking, Susan's charming smile suddenly faded. The voice on the other end of the line was not her brother's. It was. Doom, what did you do to him? Susan's heart trembled as she heard the bombardment and Jonathan's groaning and wailing. Her clear eyes turned red. Yan Chen took in all the changes. He pursed his lips tightly and looked serious. A murderous intent. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.